am Lidarga Velazi. Welcome to ILTV's special live broadcast. Today we're going to see the return of three hostages, Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami, in the fifth stage of the hostage return in the first phase of the deal. I'm joined here by Colonel Amit Asa, who will give us analysis today on what we're seeing. And right now we're looking at photos of Gaza. We're awaiting the release of the three hostages, 3 men today. And we are set to see Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami. It's going to be a bittersweet reunion today, and we will shortly see these 3 men released. Right now, the Red Cross is making its way to the pick-up point where Hamas has once again put on a show, once again set up a stage, putting on their usual PR show when they release the hostages. We're seeing armed Hamas men. We're seeing a stage being set up. Amit, turning to you, what do you make of this show that we're seeing?
Yeah, it's a big show for Hamas. As we know, they are willing to do this kind of a show for the propaganda, to show the whole world that they are ruling in Gaza, that it's also for their people. Palestinians in Gaza Strip have to see this show to understand that Hamas is still on his hand, on his legs, and is ruling Gaza. It's very important for Hamas also to show that they are treating the hostages as human as we understand that it's just a show, because they are dealing with them with no human real life. And I think we will see again a show with a lot of soldiers. Even if Hamas doesn't have any force like before, they will show us that there is a lot of soldiers surrounding there. It's a big show for Hamas, of course. It's a propaganda.
Absolutely, and we've seen this in the first 4 stages that they've released the hostages. This is the 5th stage in the first phase of the deal, and we have 3 more stages left after this one. Next week we're supposed to see the release of another 3 hostages, the week after another 3 hostages, and in the final week we're supposed to see the release of the remaining 11 hostages, totaling 33 hostages that have been released, along with 5 Thai nationals that were released as well by Hamas. And right now we're looking at scenes again from Deir el-Balach. We're seeing Hamas's stage show, and of course the crowd beginning to gather as the Red Cross is making its way to the pickup point. The hostages will be transferred over to the Red Cross, after which the Red Cross will deliver them into the hands of the IDF. They'll undergo a preliminary medical checkup, and then they'll make their way to the Re'im military base in the hands of the IDF, and where they'll reunite with their families, and after that they'll make their way to the hospital, depending on their conditions, whether to Ichilov or Sheba Hospital in Tel Aviv, or if their medical conditions are not so great, then they'll make their way to hospitals further south in Beersheba or in Ashkelon. And so we're waiting for the first images of the hostages, the 3 hostages, Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami. And right now we're seeing all the preparations that Hamas is making in its in its regular PR show that it puts on every time it goes through one of these hostage releases. So this is Deir el-Balach, from what I understand. And we were just talking ahead of the broadcast. You were telling me a little bit about Deir el-Balach and its significance right now.
Yeah, of course, Deir el-Balach is the central area of Gaza Strip. It's not Gaza City. And what's important there is that we know that IDF haven't been there yet. IDF was acted previously with the northern side of Gaza, Jabalia, Shajaya, and all the area in the north, and also in Rafah that it's in the south. Deir al-Balah wasn't acted, and the reason was because we know that most of the hostages are kept in there in Deir al-Balah, and we didn't want them to be hurt if we are getting into action in Deir al-Balah. That's why we can see a lot of buildings are still on, and it's not damaged. And the IDF is intending to get into Deir al-Balah to maintain the force against all the Hamas that are there. And this is the stage that they choose because it's shown that they are alive, they are still with no damage, and they have the power to rule the Gaza Strip.
So a very stark contrast from some of the other scenes that we've seen in Gaza, scenes of destruction, buildings, collapsed. And here we see really buildings intact. We see lots of cars, lots of people. Almost looks like a normal, city.
Yeah, this is part of the show. This is part of the show to see, to show to the world everything is under control. We are ruling Gaza, but this is just a show.
And they've also put on an interesting sign that we see that we were talking about as well, that basically sends a message to U.S. President Donald Trump and to Israel.
Yeah, we can see it on the stage, and later we can watch it because it will be on stage behind people that are standing on the stage. They put something new, and they put a sign that saying that there was a day after, meaning they are answering what Trump said, that the day after Hamas will not be there. They are putting a sign, a new sign for Trump and for the world that there was a day after.
And so let's talk a little bit about sort of this bombshell that U.S. President Trump dropped this past week in his press conference with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu was the very first foreign leader to meet with Trump, to be invited to the White House, sort of in a show of solidarity between Israel and the U.S., repairing ties that were perhaps damaged a little bit in the Biden administration. And Trump dropping this bombshell that he intends to relocate all of the Gazan civilians to other countries, Egypt, Jordan, perhaps other countries as well, and rebuild the Gaza Strip. So what do you make of this plan? Is it feasible? Is it plausible?
First, it's possible because it's been done in other places in the world. Just in Gaza, we didn't do it because actually nobody wants the Palestinian. They know that terror organization. They're willing to do damage any place that they will be in. In the history, we know that in Jordan, they make a lot of mess, the Palestinians. Nobody wants them in the Hashemi kingdom. In Egypt also, the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Brotherhood of Muslims, are putting the administration of Egypt in a risk. So nobody wants them. But still, I think that if we are spreading them in other places, I think the question will be how the nations in the world that are speaking now for the Palestinians will do something for them and not against them, and Trump will use it. Trump is using it to show to the world that it can be done, it's possible, and I think it's not a lot of people. We're not talking about 2 million people because the numbers are very, very low than 2 million. Yeah. We are talking about 800,000 people in Gaza Strip today, and this is the real numbers that we will be able to move, and it's more easy. And then I think that part of the Gaza population will be there still after the day after, because we have to rebuild the place and we need workers, and so it's not everyone, but still I can say that it can be done.
It's interesting, and Trump also sort of exposing the hypocrisy of countries that speak out on behalf of the Palestinians but then shut their gates and do not want to take them in. It's a very interesting scenario, especially when you think of all the other countries, Syria, for example, and we saw millions of refugees being taken in by countries throughout the world, Europe and many other countries. And with the Palestinians, when the question of the Palestinians arises, suddenly it's ethnic cleansing. Suddenly it's Israel trying to remove them, and all the rules sort of go out the window. So it's a very interesting to see this hypocrisy exposed by the Trump administration as well.
Yes, but in real life we know that Palestinian is a radical Islam. Radical Islam nobody wants in the countries, and it's not something that you can live with. That's why it's not just hypocrite, it's very dangerous for countries to have them. But I think in this change of world changing, area changing of the Middle East, I think we will be able to build it.
Yes, there's certainly the question of having to sort of denazify, in a way, the Palestinian population. They've been taught for decades towards hatred of Israel, hatred of the West. It's going to be a very, very difficult process to re-educate them. And of course, this is in part due to the education system of UNRWA, which has been teaching them hatred instead of promoting peace. So this is also being exposed
everything
today.
Is based on education. When you educate your kids for violence, for the legitimate of Israel, to hatred, they will grow up to be a nukhba, to be a terrorist.
Yeah.
And this is the main point that we have to concentrate in the day after. The education, the schools, the controlling the education system, and also in mosques. And what the imam will say in the mosque in Friday is very important, because it's part of the propaganda to maintain the terror.
And that's interesting. That's also, I think, why Trump wants to bring in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, some of the Gulf states, because they were able to successfully do that. They were able to successfully reform their education systems, to root out anti-Semitism, to root out teaching of hatred and violence. And so, they could serve as models for the future of Gaza for sure. And, I want to point out, we're seeing on the screen now, we're seeing once again the scenes of in Deir al-Balah. We're seeing Hamas preparing to transfer over the hostages to the Red Cross. And, we're seeing crowds of people starting to stream in to the transfer site. But it looks organized, right? Because 2 weeks ago we had a very, very chaotic scene, very disturbing scenes when Arbel Yehud and Gadi Moses were transferred over. And I think that since that time, Hamas is trying to ensure that it's orderly. We see that the people are being sort of held back by some sort of...
Yeah, I think that Hamas had a very bad experience at this event, and they knew and they understand that it's damaging the propaganda. That's why they will do it very orderly today. That's what I think, and they will control the audience. They will control the people as much as they can. They want the order because it's developing a good propaganda for them.
Absolutely, and I want to just reiterate for our viewers that may be tuning in now. Today, we are set to see the release of Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami, 3 male hostages who were kidnapped on October 7th. They've been held for 491 days now in captivity, and they're set to be released today. We are now waiting for the Red Cross to arrive at the pickup point, the transfer point, where Hamas will hand over the 3 hostages, most likely putting them through this PR show, parading them on stage, asking them to wave to the crowds, making them sign a certificate, or, the show that we've seen the past few weeks, and then, of course, giving them their gift bag from their stay in captivity.
Yeah, I think it's part of the show. It's part of the thing that they want to show to the world, that they are using humanitarian way of treatment to our people, but it's of course cynical and hypocritical. And I hope people in the world will understand that it's all show, and it's not something that sign that they are human beings. They are monsters. They took people from their homes. They are treating them like animals in the tunnels, and we have to remember it when we will see this show today on the stage.
Absolutely. And I do want to talk a little bit about the hostages themselves. You know, we have 3 men being released today. They're being released under the humanitarian phase of the hostage deal. We see they are all older men. Ohad Ben Ami, he's 56 years old. He's a resident of Kibbutz Be'eri, and he was kidnapped with his wife as well, and she was released in the November 2023 hostage deal, and he is set to be reunited with her today. And we have Levy and Eli Sharabi, who all have very, very tragic stories. You know, we all are familiar with the story of the Bibas family, Yarden Bibas, who was released last week, but there are many, many other similar stories, families that have been torn apart, ripped apart, children murdered, spouses murdered, all on October 7th. And in the coming weeks, we're going to be seeing, I think, much more bittersweet releases. We're going to be seeing hostages coming back in poor condition, and we're going to be seeing hostages, unfortunately, coming back in coffins.
Yeah, it's mixed, the tragedy with the happiness that we see now, and we are all thrilled with what's happening when they are releasing people. It's all mixed with the tragedy, and as much as we will step on forward with the stages, we will see less and less happiness and more tragedies in these stories, and maybe other condition and bad condition of the hostages. I hope not, but we will see also people that comes not alive from that. And the more that we will get forward with the stages, it will be more tragic than happiness.
Absolutely. And once again, we're seeing the scenes now. We're seeing the pickup trucks, Hamas terrorists in full military attire, something that they weren't wearing these past 16 months. But of course, every time a hostage release occurs, they put on their military gear, come out with their rifles, put on a full show for the world to see.
I think these trucks are a symbol. They were a symbol also in the attack in the 7th of October. We saw that this is the tool, the main tool. It's not tanks. It's not a vehicle of army. This is a symbol of Hamas warriors. That's why they are putting these trucks on the stage or near the stage to show to the world, this is the symbol for us. We are simple. We are using these simple trucks against the big IDF, and we are winning with these trucks, and it's a very big symbol for them.
Absolutely, and when we see these white pickup trucks, this is, of course, reminiscent of the October 7th massacre, where we saw Hamas terrorists riding in on these white pickup trucks, and so this is a very symbolic move on the part of Hamas. And again, and we're seeing right now visuals of the Re'im junction, where the hostages will arrive later today, and we're seeing people setting up signs to welcome them back home, putting up the yellow flags, preparing. This is at the Re'im base, Re'im IDF base, so this is what we're seeing now, the preparations being made for the return of these 3 hostages today. And you can see them tying the flag. So what we're waiting for now is for the Red Cross to arrive at the pickup point in Deir el-Balach. We are waiting for the Red Cross to arrive, and then Hamas will transfer the hostages over to the Red Cross, and then they will make their way back towards Israel. They'll be transferred to the hands of the IDF, and they'll undergo a preliminary medical examination, and then they'll be transferred to the Re'im military base to reunite with their family, and then they'll make their way to hospitals either in Tel Aviv, either to Ichilov Hospital or Shiva Hospital if their condition allows it. If not, they'll be helicoptered in to hospitals in Soroka and Barzilai in Ashkelon. And again, we are waiting to see the first visuals of the hostages. We don't know their conditions. You know, we haven't heard or seen a proof of life from them. So we are waiting to see what condition they're going to be released in today.
Yeah, I think that Hamas will want to show that their condition is good. So I hope they will bring them with a good condition as at the past, and we will see them at the stage standing. I hope their condition will be good, as much as Hamas, as I said, wants to show to the world that they are treating them well, they are feeding them well, and they are putting them very good clothes. This is part of the show of the Hamas, and I hope that they will lead them to bring them with a good condition.
Yes, we're all hoping that they'll be released in good condition. You know, some of the hostages today that are going to be released are coming home only to learn, to discover that all of their family members have been murdered on October 7th or in captivity. And so it's going to be a very bittersweet reunion today. And here we're seeing once again the stage that Hamas has set up in Deir al-Balach. We're seeing the pickup trucks. We're seeing the armed men. You see a row of armed men standing in the front. We see, and of course, we see all of the cameras being set up for this PR show. We see 1, 2, I think 3 cameras all set up. And we know that these hostage exchanges are actually staged by none other than Al Jazeera.
Yeah, we know that Al Jazeera is Qatar. Qatar is funding Hamas all the way. Hamas knows that they are counting on Al Jazeera. Qatar is the same. For us, we have to deal with Qatar, and Donald Trump will have to deal with Qatar in a way of maybe not being the supporters of Hamas anymore, and this will bring down the Hamas also financially. So we need to see it very closely, because Al Jazeera is the hand of Qatar. Qatar trying to look like they are not involved in Hamas propaganda, but they are still doing it.
I think October 7th also revealed the extent to which Qatar has been funding terrorism, has been playing both sides. And we see, of course, as well in the United States, for example, the universities, the anti-Semitism, the anti-Western sentiment that's being spewed from these universities. And we see suddenly a Qatari connection there as well. So Qatar has really been exposed, for its role in hosting Hamas all these years. It's going to be very interesting to see the aftermath of this, because right now they're playing the mediator. They're playing both sides, essentially.
Yeah, they're trying to play as a mediator. They are trying to play as much as they can, not part of what Hamas is doing, but behind the screen. We know they are founding them. We know that all the money that give to the pro-Palestinian in United States university is from Qatar. And I think Donald Trump will deal with Qatar more heavily, more hard. And the other sign for us is that Donald Trump is looking for another place to base American in the Middle East. Maybe Gaza Strip will be the next state, the next base, and he will leave Qatar with their own, and will get the American soldier out of the bases in Qatar. It will give Qatar a very big hit, and I think the expose of Qatar as part of the propaganda and part of the foundation of Hamas and terror will lead them to fall.
Well, let's hope that's what happens indeed, that Trump takes out the military base from Qatar. And we're seeing, again, lots of people streaming in to the transfer site. We're seeing a lot of movement suddenly at the transfer site. We're not sure exactly what's happening, but we're seeing, again, a lot of photographers, a lot of cameramen. We're seeing the people marching with Palestinian flags. What's interesting is we're not seeing very many Hamas flags being flown at this transfer site, but we're seeing suddenly
we will see.
Somebody has arrived.
Yeah.
It seems like not a hostage, I think, but someone's arrived. Walking there. There's a little bit of commotion at the scene. People photographing, filming it. And we do know that the Red Cross is now on its way to the pickup point, so we're waiting their arrival. We're seeing a little bit of commotion at the transfer scene. We're not quite sure who has arrived or what's going on there, but they seem to have cleared the way now. And again, we see so many cameras set up at this site on Deir el-Balach. It's just incredible, the PR show that Hamas is putting on.
Yeah, we can see the stage now. We can see the place that they will put on the hostages, and we can see that it's order. It's not a mass. It's not what happened in the past. They know that they have to show to the world that they are controlling everything, and this is a thing that they want to show today: controlling the audience, controlling the people, controlling the troops, and doing a show is part of the propaganda of Hamas around the world, so it's very important for them.
Again, and we see, we talked about this at the beginning of the broadcast, but for those tuning in, we see on stage a new phrase that Hamas has put up in a statement to U.S. President Donald Trump.
Yeah, I want everybody to see when they will be on stage, it will be very obvious the sign behind them. And the sign is new. It's not a sign that we saw at the past. It's some kind of an answer for Donald Trump saying for the day after, when they are writing on the sign in Hebrew, in Arabic, and in English, that there was a day after is belong to them. It's belong to the Nukhba. It's belong to Tufan, as they say. They name their troops, that they are the war's day after. It's some kind of an answer to what Trump said, and it's a new sign.
A new sign, again, Hamas sending a message to U.S. President Donald Trump. We are not going anywhere the day after the war. We are here to stay, and we are here to rule in Gaza. And, you know, it's interesting to see. We're seeing lots of crowds streaming in slowly into the pickup point in Deir el-Balach. We're also seeing here in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. You know, it's a very cold morning today. We've had a couple days of rain here in Israel and in Gaza. And it's a very chilly morning, but we're also starting to see streams of people coming into Tel Aviv's Hostages Square to see the release of the three hostages, Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami, who are set to be released today. So also people braving the sort of chilly weather here in Tel Aviv, coming to Hostages Square to show support for the families, to show support for the hostages, streaming here in to Tel Aviv's Hostage Square. And again, on the screen now we see the three hostages that are set to be released today: Ohad Ben Ami, Eli Sharabi, and Levy. It's going to be a very bittersweet reunion today. Eli Sharabi being released to learn that his wife and children were murdered on October 7th, and his brother, who was taken into captivity with him in Gaza, also murdered. We're not sure that he knows of this. We're not sure that he's aware of the fate of his family. So it's going to be a very, very bittersweet, very tragic reunion today.
Yes, but part of the tragic, or the side of the tragic, there is a lot of joy. And even if it's chilling weather, our heart are warm and will be warm when we will see them released. It's a very big happiness. And the side of that comes with it the tragedy of the 7th of October. Also, these people will deal with a lot of tragedy in their families.
Absolutely, and I just want to convey to our viewers sort of the sentiment here, not only in Hostages Square, but in Israel. Every time a hostage is released, I mean, it brings tremendous, tremendous joy to Israelis. You know, on Saturdays, we've seen the past few weeks, we've just seen Israelis sitting at home, glued to their TV sets, watching these releases, watching these transfers unfold. And we hear, you know, the absolute joy you hear here in Hostages Square whenever the transfer is complete. We hear shouts of cheer, clapping, applause. I mean, really just tears of happiness to see these hostages come out.
I think it's just showing the difference between us and them. We are changing the life, change life, and we are enjoying seeing people live. And the other side, they are sharing the death. They're sharing, they don't care with life, and this is the main difference between us and them.
Absolutely. Israelis cheering for life, cheering for the release of hostages that have been kept in brutal conditions for over 491 days in Hamas captivity in Gaza, with each hostage being released, you know, cheers of joy, happiness for Israelis. And on the other side, we're seeing, I mean, we have to talk about this as well, the cost of this deal. We're seeing the release of hundreds of Palestinian terrorists, many with blood on their hands, many terrorists who are responsible for the deaths of many Israelis, Americans, and other nationalities being released as part of this deal.
Yes, I think that we have to speak about the price.
Yeah.
As we can see now, we are willing to pay a very big price, and maybe the hard price that we can for releasing hostages, but still we have to speak about the price. The price is very high. The price is releasing terrorists into the area. They are putting fresh blood to the terrorist attack. They will try to do attacks on Israelis, and the price will be in the future, not now. The names that we don't know about them that will be killed because of these terrorists are releasing, this is the price really that we will have to pay. And of course the price is families at the past that was hurt.
I want to stop you for a second, because what we're seeing on the screen now is actually the commotion that we saw earlier is a parade of women and children, Palestinian women and children carrying Palestinian flags that Hamas is videotaping as they make sort of this little parade ahead of the release of the hostages. We're seeing again the cynical use of children and women by Hamas being paraded in the streets, cameramen surrounding them walking, carrying Palestinian flags. This is also something new, this sort of parade
it's not
that
just,
they're putting
it's
on.
not just a cynical way to show that they are part of the war. It's also part of the education, part of mentality. The mentality that also women are giving their sons to the war, to be suicide bombers, to be killers, to be terrorists. It's part of the agenda, the part of the ideology. And this is what important to see here. It's women and children are part of the terror organization.
Yes, a lot of times we hear the terms innocent civilians in Gaza, and you have to ask yourself, you know, you see these children being indoctrinated from the age of essentially since they're born, and they're also victims in a sense of this terrorist organization, indoctrinating them and teaching them to hate and inciting them to violence from such a young age. So again, we're seeing Deir el-Balach, where the transfer of the hostages is set to take place from Hamas to the Red Cross. The Red Cross is on its way to this staged area, so we're awaiting and here we see again Hamas, you know, in full military gear. The past 16 months they've been hiding in civilian clothing, and suddenly now they put on, you know, their full military gear, and we're seeing, I mean, really dozens of cameras being set up today, more so than usual, I would say. So they're really putting on quite a show here in Deir el-Balach. It's, as we mentioned earlier, you were saying Deir el-Balach, a strategic location today.
Yeah, I think it's a strategical location for the Hamas because they are holding Deir el-Balach very strong. They have a lot of troops, a lot of brigades that are working, they are still alive. And it's important for them to show to the world that this central area of Gaza Strip is still in their hands. And I think that another word I can add about the Red Cross. Red Cross is getting in to get our hostages. They are just drivers. They didn't do anything for the hostages all this month. Not names, not a condition, nothing they did for the hostages. And just a sign that they are just drivers in this occasion.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important to mention, the role of the Red Cross and other international human rights organizations. The Red Cross especially has not visited a single hostage for the past 16 months in Gaza. And not only have they not visited the hostages, but you don't hear them standing up and making statements, calling on Hamas to let them visit the hostages, calling on Hamas to update on the conditions of the hostages. Absolute silence from the International Red Cross since October 7th. They have been really nothing but a Uber driver, essentially, in this, and of course, playing along. We've seen them playing along with Hamas's PR show, going up on stage, signing, these fake documents that Hamas asked them to sign. So really playing along with Hamas. They've done absolutely nothing these past 16 months. Now, I want to also talk about, the phases of this hostages deal. Right now, negotiations are underway for the second stage of the deal. Can you perhaps walk us through what we can expect now? What are the next stages of the deal, and what can we expect looking forward to stage 2?
Guys, I think that the next stages will be more hostages, maybe other condition, maybe we will start bringing people that are not alive. But still, I think from the way of the point of view of the Hamas, they will want to bring it very slowly, as much as they can, because they are buying time. Time for them is very precious. They are organizing inside the Gaza. They are recruiting troops. They are remanufacturing arms in Gaza and mostly in the Deir el-Balach area, and they need this time. So they will move on step by step, week after week, and they will be able to do these steps, and they won't stop and they won't rule this stage because they want this time. The time is for them.
Absolutely, and Israel, though, is basically waiting. Right now, Israelis are waiting to see the release of the hostages. Again, we're seeing scenes from the from the transfer site. And I want to go now over to Shosh Bedrosian. She's here in ILTV's broadcast here in Hostages Square. Shosh, I would like to hear from you a little bit about the hostages that are being released today. Levy, Eli Sharabi, Ohad Ben Ami. What can you tell us, some of them with really tragic stories?
Yeah, so first off, let's start with Eli Sharabi. Kidnapped from Kibbutz Be'eri. He was held in his safe room in his home with his wife and his 2 daughters, 16 years old and 13 years old.
And we can't hear Shosh right now. We're having some...
Their home was
Shosh, we couldn't hear you. Can you tell us again? We want to hear a little bit about the hostages.
Sure. So we're talking about Eli Sharabi. specifically right now. He was kidnapped from Kibbutz Be'eri. He was held in his safe room with his family. They were taken hostage there in their home with his wife, his two daughters, 16 years old and 13 years old. Eventually, Hamas terrorists set their home on fire on Kibbutz Be'eri. Eli was then kidnapped into Gaza, and the remains of his wife and his two daughters were found later. It's unfortunate and it's a tragedy that Eli Sharabi will be coming home today with no immediate family. He will only be able to embrace with his brother Sharon, who's been fighting for his release for 491 days since he was taken captive by Hamas terrorists. His brother Yossi was also taken by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. He also lived right next door to his brother on Kibbutz Be'eri, but IDF declared Yossi dead, that his body is being held in captivity still at this time. This is just one of the tragic stories that we're hearing today. Imagine, put yourself in this man's shoes just for one moment. You survive October 7th. You survive 491 days of captivity to leave Gaza to find out that your wife and your two daughters were murdered on that day. It is a day of mourning for them, but it's a day of rediscovering life. We know from a lot of these hostages, they say they feel reborn. This day of leaving on Shabbat is a day of rebirth for them. Let's also talk about the story of Ohad Ben Ami. His video, his image captivated a lot of the world because it showed the innocence of so many people on October 7th. Ohad was kidnapped in his underwear, in his boxers, early in the morning on October 7th. He was kidnapped with his wife, Raz. His daughter survived. Nachaloz, his other daughter, survived. Also on Kibbutz Be'eri, taken from their home. There's images of Ohad being taken in his underwear as well. One of the last text messages he had to one of his daughters was, Shema Yisrael, they're here. They were entering their home. They were taken. His wife, Raz, was later released in the November of 2023 deal, and Ohad has been held there ever since. He will be able to reunite with his family today. His wife, his daughters have been waiting for him. His wife, Raz, describes that her health deteriorated significantly in those 50-plus days she was held in Hamas captivity, and she knows what could happen to so many of those hostages, including her husband, who is coming out today. The other hostage, Levy, 34 years old. He and his wife were travelers. They went to Thailand. They traveled the world together, and they decided to go to the Nova Music Festival on the morning of October 7th. Just minutes from when they arrived, the rockets started going off, and Hamas terrorists infiltrated where the Nova Music Festival was happening. He and his wife went into a bomb shelter. What happened there is his wife ended up getting murdered. He was then taken into Gaza by Hamas terrorists. He happened to actually be taken in the exact same vehicle as Hersh Goldberg Poland, who we know, unfortunately and tragically, was murdered by Hamas terrorists in captivity. We do know they were separated in captivity once they arrived in Gaza, or left behind his 3-year-old son, who has been in the hands of his parents, the child's grandparents, since October 7th, being cared for by family members. He will be returning to reunite with this 3-year-old little boy and his wife, who is no longer here. Lidar, these stories are tragic. They're harrowing to hear. There is so much pain when it comes to them coming home. But for so many, we've heard these stories, like we said, of rebirth. And I'll send it back to you. I know we have updates coming in right now.
Absolutely, Shosh. I mean, these really are tragic stories from October 7th. But hopefully today we'll have somewhat of a happy ending as they are reunited with their families. And right now there were cheers erupting here in Hostages Square as we heard that they announced that the Red Cross is set to arrive at the transfer point shortly, and we should be seeing the 3 hostages being transferred over to the Red Cross. So that's going to happen very shortly. And again, here in Tel Aviv, we're seeing large crowds starting to gather here in Hostages Square, preparing for the release of the hostages. And you know, there was a little bit of apprehension here in Israel, a little bit of drama unfolding yesterday, because Hamas was supposed to send over the list of the 3 hostages that were set to be released, and they didn't do it on time, and there was a little bit of apprehension here in Israel that perhaps due to President Trump's statements about sort of his plan for Gaza, that Hamas might renege on the deal, or, you know, sort of play some more games.
Yeah,
as it does.
Hamas propaganda is playing games, is to show the world that they are ruling everything and not us, and not the Americans. And that's why there will be other plays also in the future. That's what I think. But still, it will not be something that will rule the stages of the deal. They will not blow up the deal, as we can say, because they know that they need the deal. They need the time of the ceasefire for the future. So, as we can understand, it's just a game for them. They are playing with us to show that they are the ruling in this game, and that's all. They will not blow up the deal.
Yeah, they won't blow up the deal. They're just playing mind games, essentially, with Israelis, as they've been doing all along.
Psychologically, mentally.
Psychological warfare, psychological games that they're playing with the Israeli public. Really, the epitome of evil, if we can call them, just unbelievable. And again, we're seeing the scenes here at Deir el-Balah. We're seeing a very strong show of force by Hamas. We're seeing the pickup trucks. We're seeing men, the Hamas terrorists, in full military gear, and lots of cameramen, lots and lots of photographers. Really, you see now we're seeing people, essentially Gazans, coming to see this propaganda show, being allowed to take pictures. I mean, it really is just a show for them.
It's just a show. It's a big show. It's a very important show for the Hamas. They want to show not just the world, the people in Gaza, that they are the rulers, that they are the government. Still, they are ruling everything. And this is a very important for them to show that they are on strength, they have arm, they have pickups, they have the ability to make such a show in the middle of Deir el-Balah, in the middle of the war. And this is important for them, and not just outside to the world, it's more to the people of Gaza.
And we know that this is just a show because Israel has severely hampered Hamas's capabilities in the Gaza Strip. You know, what is your estimate today of sort of Hamas's capabilities, aside from the shows that they're putting on?
Yeah, I think that not on the north, or maybe not in Rafah, but in the central Gaza Strip, mostly in Deir el-Balah area, they are still on. They have a lot of brigades that didn't got hit from the actions of IDF because we didn't hit them. We thought that the hostages are with them. They are putting the hostages as a human shield, and that's why they are still handling all this area with a lot of brigades, a lot of Nukhba members and terrorists, and they have arms, and maybe they can manufacture also missiles inside the area, in the places. But I think that they know that the minute that they will have no shield as the hostages, Israel will get in to a war against all the area of Deir el-Balah. That's why they need the hostages to be very, very far away with days, weeks, and they will put the time very long to be because of that reason.
Hamas, of course, interested in drawing out, as you said, drawing out the next stages of the ceasefire deal in order to give itself time to rearm, to regroup, to recruit new members. And this is what we're seeing today. This is how Hamas is trying to survive in
Yeah, they are
Gaza.
rebuilding. They're rebuilding the forces. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of fund that comes in because we are getting in a lot of trucks and aid. This aid that we are getting in are handling first to the arms of the Hamas, and they are using it to sell it to their own people, and then they have a lot of money. They can recruit people. They can do whatever they want, and this is the main tragic in the whole system, that we are giving the aid to the Hamas and not to the people. We are strengthening Hamas instead of putting them down, and this is the main issue of aid, humanitarian aid, that it's a very big mistake of Israel and also the world to give the Hamas the aid and not to the people.
Absolutely. Hamas throughout this entire 16 months has been, we know, hijacking all the humanitarian aid that's going into Gaza, again, showing that it doesn't care about the Palestinian people, either about the Palestinian civilians. Its only aim is to strengthen itself, and they've been hijacking the humanitarian aid that's been going into Gaza, keeping it for themselves, storing it in their underground bunkers for their fighters, for their terrorist fighters. And so, again, a cynical use of Hamas.
And also they know that if Israel will get into war again, they have to get under the ground a lot of food, a lot of fuel, and they are doing it now. So in the future, they will have a lot of time to be in tunnel with no aid from the outside because they are storing that in that time today.
Yeah. All right, and again, we're seeing right now scenes from Deir el-Balach, where the transfer of the hostages is set to take place. The Red Cross is making its way now to the transfer point in Deir el-Balach, where Hamas has set up a stage, and we're going to take a 1-minute break. You can see the scenes right now on your screen. We're going to take a 1-minute break, and we'll be right back.
אני רוצה לדעת מבחינת לוחות זמנים איפה אנחנו עומדים.
אז עכשיו 9:38.
לא, אני יודע, אני פשוט מסתכל קדימה כי אני...
And we're back from ILTV's special coverage of the hostage release, where we're going to see very shortly the release of Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami from Hamas captivity in Gaza after 491 days in captivity. We're looking now at scenes of Deir el-Balach, where Hamas has set up a stage, a PR show for the world as they are set to transfer over the hostages. The Red Cross is now making its way. And right now we're also seeing scenes at Kibbutz Be'eri, one of the sites of the October 7th massacre, one of the hardest hit communities that were really hardest hit on October 7th. 25% of the population either murdered or taken captive into Gaza. And we're seeing people there preparing for the return of Eli Sharabi, one of the hostages who's set to be released today. As we heard earlier from Shosh Bedrosian, he has really a tragic story. On October 7th, he was kidnapped and taken into Gaza along with his brother, who lived next door to him in the kibbutz. His wife and children were murdered by Hamas. He was taken into captivity, and his brother, unfortunately, tragically, was also murdered by Hamas. He's set to be released today. We don't know if he's aware that his family has been murdered, so it's going to be a very bittersweet reunion. But we see at the kibbutz people preparing for his return, hanging up signs, ready to embrace him, ready to welcome him home. So these are the scenes that we're seeing right now in Israel. Of Kibbutz Be'eri, kibbutz that was really ravaged on October 7th. A very beautiful, peaceful kibbutz up until October 7th. And you can contrast that now with the images we're seeing on the screen in Gaza of armed terrorists and Palestinian so-called civilians who are making their way to watch the transfer of the hostages. So really two very stark contrasts, one in Israel and one in Gaza.
Yeah, we are cheering the life, and they are cheering death and the terrorists. And as we can see, a lot of movement of civilians that cheering Hamas, willing Hamas to be ruling Gaza. We understand, of course, that the population in Gaza Strip is more with Hamas. So the population in Gaza is Hamas, and they are all thinking the same. They are cherish death, not as in our places cheering jail life.
Absolutely, the stark contrast that we are seeing today. And again, we are now awaiting the arrival of the Red Cross. We're waiting for them to arrive at the transfer, at the pickup site. We're told that they are making their way. They should be arriving shortly, and then we'll have the first images of the three hostages. Again, we don't know their condition. We don't know, we've had essentially no signs of life from them, and so we are waiting for the first glimpses to see their conditions. We do know that from previous hostage releases that Hamas has essentially allowed them to shower, clothed them, given them a little bit of food before the release to make it look as though they're in good condition.
The part of the propaganda that is showing to the world that they are treating well the hostages, they are treating well as a war hostages, and we know that it's cynical. We know that they are doing it just for the show. We know how they're treating them as not as a human being, into tunnels with no food, with no water, with no light for a month. So it's all show to show to the world that maybe they are human, but it's not the truth.
Absolutely. We know that some of the hostages that were released last week were held in absolutely brutal conditions. Keith Siegel, for the last 2 months, was held alone and told that he had to shut his eyes most of the time and was not allowed to speak for 2 whole months. His family revealed that he would close his eyes and imagine that he was holding conversations with his wife Aviva and his children and his nieces and nephews. And that's what kept him grounded. That's what gave him hope to continue. And I want to now go over to Shosh Bedrosian, who's in Hostage Square amongst the families, amongst the crowd that has gathered here today. Shosh, what can you tell us? What's the atmosphere like right now in Hostage Square?
Yeah, so it definitely started to fill up here. A lot more people have come. I want to remind our viewers, today is Shabbat, the Sabbath here in Israel. A lot of people usually stay in, but it's important to note we have a large crowd here already starting. The hostage release has already been delayed by Hamas. We were expecting an 8:30 start for the first ceremony to take place, but nothing has happened yet. Like you said, Lidar, earlier, we're expecting two different releases to happen today in central Gaza for these 3 male hostages. Here in Hostage Square, we have people carrying the posters of these hostages, already emotional, waiting for them to come out. Like we said, we're continuing to say, we want to put our viewers in the shoes of these families and think about these hostages that are coming out, the real life stories of these people, what they've survived, what they're coming home to. I use this analogy of being locked in a time capsule for 491 days, the worst time capsule you could ever imagine after surviving something so horrific, not actually knowing what the state of Israel is like, what actually happened on October 7th, what happened to your own family on October 7th, surviving the brutality of captivity, coming out to realizing the facts of this war, the facts of what happened on October 7th, that Hamas terrorists stormed these kibbutzim, went into people's homes, kidnapped, murdered, burned, did horrific atrocities for these people to relearn. We know that a lot of these hostages are starting to learn what happened on October 7th. A lot of them did have some knowledge from hearing TV, radio, from their captivity time, but to know and to understand the full capacity of what happened on that day is horrific. Here in Hostage Square, they play the live stream of what is happening in Gaza, so we're going to continue to follow all of the things that happen once these hostages are handed over from Hamas to the Red Cross. One thing to note that we have continued to see, this is the 5th hostage release that has happened. It is the 5th one that likely the Red Cross will be complicit with Hamas, go onto their stage, sign Hamas documentation of the release of these hostages, the movement of them from Hamas captivity to Red Cross to Israel. This is a part of the propaganda Hamas has created. And remember, this is a terrorist organization. These people stormed Israel on October 7th and did horrific things to so many people, inflicting so much pain onto their own people inside of Gaza, making them go through a war for more than 15 months after they stormed into Israel. Something also to note, and we will continue to say, that these hostages will be picked up. They'll be transferred from Hamas to the hands of the Red Cross, from the Red Cross to Israel. They will be in the hands of the IDF somewhere in the Gaza Strip. They will then cross into Israel with the IDF, taken to Rei military base, which is their first stop for initial checkups. That's where those reunifications will happen with their family. Lidar, as we continue to say, very emotional, as 2 of these hostages will not be reunited with their immediate family. Just tragic situations, and I know the crowd here in Hostage Square will definitely feel that, and it's important to know we will continue to be in Hostage Square to report all of this. Lidar?
Thank you, Shosh, and we're seeing now images of the people gathering here at Hostage Square and awaiting the return of the 3 hostages. And again, now we're seeing the second, what is this, the second site for the pickup. We're seeing the site in Gaza right now where they have a sign in Hebrew saying Nitzachon Mukhlat, or total victory, sort of mocking Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's statements. We're seeing them setting up for the transfer. And again, we're being told that the Red Cross is on its way and should be arriving within just a few moments to Deir al-Balach, to the site of the hostage transfer. So we're just waiting for the Red Cross to arrive there. On their way now, we're seeing, again, Hamas putting on their show in full military gear, with rifles, trying to put on a show of force, to show not only the world but the people in Gaza that they are still in control.
Yeah, I think that we also will see the signs that is written in Hebrew and also in Arabic and in English. That is the answer for Trump propaganda against the Trump program to get a Palestinian out of Gaza the day after. Of course, they are saying in the sign that there was a day after is the Nukhba will be there, and not Trump and not the Americans. It's a very interesting sign. It's a new one. We will see it at the back side of the hostages on the stage, and it's written also in Hebrew and in Arabic. There was a day after belongs to them, as we can see now.
Yes, here we see we are the flood, the war's next day. The flood, of course, referring to the October 7th massacre, also as they called it, the Al-Aqsa flood. And so they're referencing that and saying...
An answer to Donald Trump saying... Yeah.
Absolutely, to Donald Trump, who wants to relocate the Palestinians, and Hamas saying we are not going anywhere. So we're now seeing the stage set up where they're set to transfer over the hostages to the Red Cross. The hostages are set to arrive in just a few moments. We'll have the first glimpses of all Eli and Ohad, who've been held in captivity for 491 days, really in unimaginable conditions. And so we are waiting for the Red Cross to arrive, waiting for the transfer to occur and to catch the first glimpses. And now what we're seeing are people essentially here in Israel. We're seeing scenes now on the screen of people standing along the route that the hostages will take once they make their way into Israeli territory on their way to the Ra'im base. So people standing along the road, greeting the hostages, cheering their return, trying to give them, to embrace them, to give them just a sense of how much Israelis are happy to see them return home, give them some optimism as they return. So these are the scenes we're seeing now in Israel, people awaiting and setting up signs on the sides of the road. So we're going to see that throughout Israel. And it's really heartwarming. I just want to share with our viewers that each and every time a hostage returns home, people are gathering in Hostages Square. They're gathering all along the roads, waving flags, welcoming them home, waiting outside the hospital, welcoming them home. Last week we saw Ofer Calderon greeted by a huge crowd, and he was, blowing them kisses, thanking them, for their support. And so this is what we see with each and every hostage returning home, people trying to come out, show their support for these hostages that have been held in Hamas captivity, letting them know that Israelis have absolutely not forgotten about them.
Yeah, and also I think that, again, I want to say about this celebration, for us it's a celebration of life. What you can see and what you can hear in this celebration is life, is sharing life, is wants everybody to get home safe. And in the other side, in Hamas areas, when we will release the murderers, the terrorists to the place, to the area, we will see a lot of joy. But instead of joying life, they will say again, we will go into terror organization and we will do terror attacks, and we are willing to move forward with the war, with the killing Israelis. This will be the difference between us and them.
Absolutely. Israelis celebrating life, seeing a little victory in each hostage that returns home. And of course, Israel has said that it wants to see all of the hostages returned home, of course, and only then will Israelis feel that they've achieved a total victory with the return of all of the hostages. One of the war goals that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated. And again, we're seeing in Israel, people lined up with flags, cheering the hostages on. And in Gaza, we're seeing the images of the Hamas terrorists in full military gear with their weapons, putting on a parade on the side of the road. So really, you see the stark contrast between Israelis celebrating life and Gazans celebrating violence, terrorism, and death. And so really, really stark contrast that we're seeing here. And again, Hamas, Hamas likes to do this to put on a PR show for Gazans, but, these images cannot be well received in the world. I mean, all this is doing is just strengthening the notion that these are essentially terrorists who are
the question is what world you are meaning. And when we are talking about the Arab world, the Islamic, the radical Islam in the world, but because it's a lot of movement, it's a very big and hard movement. Also in Europe, they see the Hamas as the warriors of victory. And this is what they are showing. The audience, maybe the people that they want to show, it's not our world, it's their world. And that's why they are winning in this kind of propaganda, because Islam radical, any place in the world, are winning now with these pictures.
With these images showing that Hamas is still alive and going strong in the Gaza Strip. Again, we're seeing them rolling out in their white pickup trucks, symbols of the October 7th massacre when they basically
it's a symbol. It's a symbol for them. They are showing that this kind of pickup trucks maybe defeats the IDF tanks, the IDF ammunition, and force and powerful IDF is winning by this kind of pickup trucks. It's a symbol for them.
Absolutely. And I want to transfer now back over to Shosh, who's standing in Hostages Square amid the crowds, amid the families of the hostages who have gathered here today, all eagerly awaiting the return of the 3 hostages. Shosh, what can you tell us?
Yeah, so this release has been delayed. We were expecting the release to begin at 8:30 this morning. There was also a delay that happened yesterday. Israel is supposed to get the names of these hostages 24 hours in advance. Israel received the names of these three male hostages coming out late last night after 10 p.m. And so it's important to note that there is a delay today. We are expecting the second release to happen at noon, but the delay has actually given more people here in Israel, in Hostage Square, to come out and to support these families, to watch them coming out, being transferred from Hamas to the Red Cross right here on the live stream. That's why people gather here. We have a large crowd of people with signs, with flags, and what they're doing is they're watching the live stream. So they're reacting in live as everything is happening. They're patiently waiting. They're watching this, this crowd in Gaza right now, also waiting for the hostages to be released. But usually this is an emotional crowd. When these hostages are released, there is a quietness. You see them on stage for the first time. People are cheering, but it's quiet, and they're quiet because they want to hear, they want to watch, and truly they can't believe their eyes. Seeing these hostages come across this propaganda ceremony, but to see them standing on their own 2 feet from what we've seen in the past few releases is really monumental. These people have been locked in Gaza for 491 days without any signs of life, pretty much. We're learning from a lot of these hostages, they've been in severe isolation during their time in captivity. The hostages that have been released, we recently heard testimony from American-Israeli Keith Siegel, who was released last weekend, that he was forced in the last 2 months to be alone. He wasn't allowed to speak for long periods of time. He would close his eyes and imagine conversations with his family, imagine good memories, things that would take him away from the isolation and the pain he was experiencing in that moment. It's likely we will hear really horrific and harrowing testimony from these hostages that are being released today as well. I want to talk about Eli Sharabi for one moment. Eli Sharabi we continue to mention this, but he was taken captive, and his 3 members of his family, his wife and his two daughters were murdered on October 7th. He's coming home without those embraces, without those hugs from his family members that we're continuing to see. His family, his niece, his nephews, his brother Sharon has been advocating for him to come out. Their other brother Yossi was also taken and kidnapped. His body is still in Gaza, according to Israel, but he was declared dead. These hostages are people that have been through serious things. They've been through traumas that most people in this world can never imagine, and it's important to report knowing that there is a lot of sensitive information, especially with these hostages not necessarily knowing who might be alive and who might be dead in their families. But here in Hostage Square, people are just patiently waiting, eagerly waiting to see these hostages come across the screen here. Lidar?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shosh. So we're here in Hostages Square. We're seeing really so many people gathering, making their way here. And, you know, every Saturday we see thousands and thousands gathering here in Hostages Square to call for the release of the hostages every single week. And we do know from hostages that have returned that sometimes they do hear the messages of their families, of their loved ones in Gaza, in captivity, and it gives them the strength and the hope.
Yeah, I think today is a very cold day outside, but inside, in our hearts, is very warm, and we are willing to see them, and everybody is exciting, of course, for what will happen today, and this is warming.
Absolutely.
We need it for the weather.
I like that, chilly outside but warm in our hearts, absolutely. And so we're seeing right now on the screen really the crowds gathering in Tel Aviv at Hostages Square, and we're seeing now the helicopter arriving that will transfer the hostages over once they are in IDF hands. So all the preparations being made here in Israel, waiting for the three hostages to return today. And in the meantime, we've gotten word that the Red Cross is really supposed to arrive at the pickup point in the next couple of minutes. They've been making their way over to Deir el-Balach and are waiting to see the hostages, to see the first images of the hostages being transferred from Hamas over to the Red Cross, which, as we said earlier, nothing more than an Uber service, a taxi service. They've done absolutely nothing for the hostages for the past 16 months, have not visited a single hostages, really nothing other than transfer them over and play along with Hamas's propaganda show. And again, on screen, we're seeing the helicopter landing. It will transfer the hostages over from Gaza and back into to Israeli territory, sending them to the hospitals where they'll remain, to undergo treatment and sort of rehabilitation after 16 months, 491 days in Hamas captivity. So in Israel, all the preparations are being made. Here in Hostages Square, people are eagerly awaiting the return. And again, we always say that the hostages are not back until they are in IDF hands, until they are on Israeli territory. And now we're also seeing images of the families of the hostages waiting, watching on TV, watching their expected return.
I think that Hamas will not do any kind of a change, even if they're playing a game with us in that emotional game. They are willing to move forward. They don't want to blow up the deal. That's why maybe we will see some kind of a game again in the show. But as I can understand, Hamas will not do anything to harm the deal. For them, it's good. For them, it's a good deal that leaving them time to reorganize, to recruit people, to manufacture arms, and they won't damage this deal. That's why all the game that they are playing is just a game. It's not for damaging the real hostage deal.
playing little games as they can, but not blowing up the hostages deal. Now, we know that Hamas is trying to buy time, as you said, to recruit new members, to rebuild its capabilities, stealing humanitarian aid, restocking
to storage a lot of food for themselves when it will be any kind of war again.
Exactly, stocking up on supplies. And, you know, right now we know that Israel is in control of the Philadelphia corridor, which is essentially the corridor that Hamas used on the border with Egypt to smuggle in all of its weapons, all of its supplies. Right now, Israel is in control of that. It's been a sticking point, a very important point that the Prime Minister has said he will not give up on the Philadelphia corridor. But if we look forward, look ahead to the second and third stages of the hostage deal, this is something that Hamas will demand.
Yeah, it will demand, and maybe it will be one of the prices that we will have to pay. And we have to think about what the Egyptian will do. And I hope they will control everything. But as we know, Egypt is not just helping the Hamas, it's all financial issue. They are earning a lot of money for this movement of ammunition from Egypt to Hamas all these years, and they had a lot of smuggling organization that lead them for a lot of money earning from this kind of movement. So I'm willing the Egyptian will act in other way, but I think it will not happen. Egyptian will willing to move on with the smuggling of ammunition to the Hamas because it's a big money for them.
Absolutely, very financially profitable for the Egyptians, and we've seen all these years Hamas receive its weapons through the Philadelphia corridor, through its border with Egypt, which Egypt was in full control of. Only recently did Israel take over the Philadelphia corridor to ensure that no more weapons would be smuggled into Gaza, and right now Israel is in control of the Philadelphia corridor. And it's a very important corridor to ensure that Hamas is unable to.
Yeah, but not just that. I think that Egyptians are also getting into Sinai a lot of troops, a lot of tanks. It's against the agreement, the peace agreement with Israel. But I think also Donald Trump and the Americans have to do something with it because it threatens Israel. It threatened Israel, it threatened the peace agreement with Egypt, and Egypt is in the hand of the Americans. They are giving them the ammunition, they're giving them the arms, the money, and they have to control it because, yes, the aid of the American to the Egyptian will have to make some kind of a tool for the American to control this kind of aggression. From the Egypt side.
And U.S. President Donald Trump calling on Egypt to take in civilians from Gaza. Egypt has been unwilling to take in any civilians. It essentially shut its border.
Nobody wants
it shut its border on October 7th. It was very opposed to the Rafah operation because it was worried that this would cause a stream of Palestinians into the Sinai, into Egypt. And so Egypt has essentially shut down its border with Gaza. A lot of people don't know that not only Israel shares a border with Gaza, but Egypt does as well. And Egypt has been unwilling to take in a single Palestinian civilian, and so really that's something that Trump is now calling Egypt out on, demanding that it open its border and take in Palestinians. Egypt, of course, opposing this.
Yes, I think nobody wants the Palestinian because they are bringing the ideology of terror. They are bringing the ideology of war, of any place that they will be in Europe, in any place that you can see that they are bringing the radical Islamic ideology, and nobody wants them that way inside.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just waiting now. We're seeing here at Hostages Square hundreds and hundreds of people gathering on this chilly Tel Aviv morning. We're seeing Right now on the screen, we're seeing the preparations that the IDF is making to receive these 3 hostages. The Red Cross making its way to the transfer point, so we are eagerly awaiting the first images of the 3 hostages, eagerly awaiting their transfer into the hands of the Red Cross, which will then taxi them over and transfer them to the IDF. We see the IDF helicopters already arriving, set up in place, waiting to transfer the Israeli hostages back into Israel, back into Israeli territory. So we're eagerly awaiting, and we see these images on the screen, IDF preparing, everyone in Israel preparing. And we do know that these today's hostage release has been delayed. We don't know the reason for the delay, but it's been delayed. Again, Hamas yesterday playing games. I'm assuming the delay is due to these psychological warfare games that they're playing. They like to change the times of the hostage releases, keep Israel guessing as to when they're going to actually release the hostages.
Yeah, but we have to understand that it's just a game for them, and they want to break down the hostage deal. They doesn't want to break down the hostage deal. They just want to show everybody that they are the ruling of this event. Nobody is ruling except them. What happens in Gaza Strip, in the hostage deal, they are the ruling. It's a message for the people, for the Gaza people.
Absolutely. And again, we're seeing the show that Hamas is putting on. We're seeing lots of cameramen in place, again, organized by Al Jazeera, that's orchestrating this whole, staging this whole hostage release. We're seeing a very, I have to say, orderly scene, though, in Gaza, in Deir al-Balah. The Red Cross is making its way there, but we're seeing really, look, they have a line of pickup trucks, you know, really organized. We see people standing very orderly fashion, and again, in stark contrast to the scene that we saw 2 weeks ago, where there was absolute chaos and really a fear for the well-being and safety of the hostages as they were transferred to the Red Cross. So today we're seeing very different scenes. We're seeing scenes of order, Hamas fully in control, controlling the crowds. Earlier we saw even a little parade of women and children that were, you know, parading on the street. So again, a cynical use of children by
supporting
Hamas.
And that's what shows that the people in Gaza, the population in Gaza, supporting Hamas. More than 80–90% also in the West Bank are supporting Hamas. Hamas is the population. The population is Hamas, and it's not a different. It's not that they are holding the population as the hostages. The population in Gaza is Hamas.
Absolutely, that's a very important point to make. The civilians in Gaza are Hamas. They are supporting Hamas. We see them coming out to see these hostage exchanges to show their support for Hamas. And in stark contrast, we have the scenes here in Tel Aviv's Hostages Square of families, of friends coming here, Israelis coming to see the release of the hostages. Shosh, I want to go back to you now. You're standing there amidst the crowd, amidst the families. What's the atmosphere like now, as really we're moments away from the release of the first hostages today?
Yes, yeah, definitely moments away. I think it's important to say that it's pretty impressive to get a crowd this big on Shabbat to come to do anything really. But this, as we continue to say, this is really the soul of the nation here in Israel. It doesn't matter what time it is. It doesn't matter where it is. The people of Israel will come out to support each other, especially the hostages here, especially these 3 men that have waited 491 days to come home. This is what Israel is like. No matter who is injured, no matter who is in captivity, it doesn't matter. People will come out to support, and this is exactly what it is. We've seen more and more people come out here this morning, pretty much filling up the entire square pretty quickly, actually. It was quite impressive. But people really are just waiting for this moment to see one of those hostages cross onto that stage that Hamas has set up, to see that they are alive after more than 15 months, nearly 16 months of Hamas captivity. That is the moment they're waiting for. From my experience reporting in Hostage Square, there's a lot of people here. A lot of people will come here, watch this live stream, and they're quiet. They wait. They look at the hostages on this live stream. I think they're just shocked to see when they really are alive after all of this time on their own 2 feet. It is a moment, a historical moment for so many people to bear witness to this time in history. And that's exactly what people are waiting for here, to see it with their own eyes. These hostages come out. It's unclear what their conditions are of these 3 men. This first phase of this deal is prioritizing people who might have an injury, might have chronic illnesses. Hamas is calling this list, this 33-person list, humanitarian hostages. That is a name for this phase that doesn't make sense, because all of these hostages are humanitarian hostages, but they are saying that some of these hostages have illnesses, were injured on October 7th. We know that one of the men coming out today was actually shot in his shoulder on October 7th, so there is an injury there. It's unclear what the other state of the 2 hostages might be. But it's important to note that their time in captivity are stories that will likely come out over time. But we're hearing from these other hostages the mental, the physical, the psychological abuse and trauma that they endured. Yarden Bibas was released last weekend. Now, his story has become famous around the world. It's captivated the world because his 2 young children, Kafir and Ariel, his wife Shiri, are still in Gaza, still in the Hamas hands. It's unclear what their status is. Israel has been demanding answers from them. But Yarden came out alive last weekend, and for so many people to see that, knowing his story, was beyond emotional. Yarden is someone that came home to no immediate family. He didn't feel the embrace of his children, of his wife, after spending this long in Hamas captivity. And that's going to be a similar story for the hostage of Eli Sharabi, experiencing something similar. His wife, his 2 children, his daughters were killed on October 7th. Not taken captive, but their remains were found. They were held captive in their home with Eli. Their home was set on fire while they were in the safe room. And then they were killed by Hamas. Eli was taken into Gaza. His brother Yossi from Kibbutz Be'eri, both of them were taken in. Yossi has been declared dead by the IDF, and his body is still said to be in Gaza at this time. But the emotions are pretty high. You can hear people singing behind me, embracing each other. Are released. We will be here in Hostage Square to give all of our viewers a live update of what the emotion is like here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shosh. I see you surrounded by people. There's really quite a crowd that's gathered here today. And we've gotten word that the Red Cross has arrived at the transfer point. Now, Colonel Amit Asa, I know that you have to leave us shortly, so I just want to hear maybe some final thoughts from you.
First, we are very thrilled and joy about what's happening now. We can understand that in the other side, we have a terror organization. We have a population that support the terror, that they are willing to death and not willing to a life like us. I think another thing that we have to take in consideration, this is the price. We are paying a very pressure price. Until now, we paid with soldiers that fall down for this event to happen, to bring up the hostages back, and also the price that maybe we will have to pay at the future with a lot of terrorists releasing to the area and willing to take over the terror attacks at the field, and a lot of people will be killed in Israel and maybe outside for that. So the price is also have to be in front of us.
Absolutely. Colonel Amit Asa, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are now once again awaiting the release of the 3 hostages. We are seeing now visuals on the screen of Deir el-Balach, where Hamas has set up its stage for the expected hostage release today. And so we are waiting for the Red Cross. They're about to arrive at any moment, making their way now to the pickup point. And we're waiting. We're seeing once again the scenes of the pickup trucks, scenes of Hamas terrorists in full military attire, putting on a show for the world, putting on a show for the people of Gaza. And here, in contrast, we can see scenes from Israel. We see scenes of family members awaiting from Kibbutz Be'eri. We're seeing people from the kibbutz gathered together to await the return of Eli Sharabi, one of the hostages, with the tragic story, as we've heard, his wife, his 2 children murdered on October 7th, his brother murdered in Hamas captivity, and he is set to return home today to this tragic reality. So again, a very bittersweet return. And joining me now here at the table, Shosh, you made your way through the crowd back to us here. So what can you tell us? You know, there's so many people here today. I think despite the cold weather, which Israelis are not so used to, we really are seeing a very, very massive turnout today.
Really big turnout. I'm surprised because we've been covering these releases for the last few times they've happened, the last month pretty much at this rate. I don't think we've seen a crowd this big so early on.
Right.
And I do think it's really a testament of the people of Israel. We've continued to say, like, this nation comes out. They come out when there is something like this. Life is really important to this country, and it's important to remember that. So we are seeing a lot of people. People are already emotional in this crowd, and it's something that makes sense. This story, these hostages' stories are emotional. To hear that, these hostages might be coming out, not being able to see their immediate family because they were murdered on October 7th.
I just want to stop you for a minute and share the scenes we're seeing now on the screen are the family of Ohad Ben Ami, who are waiting to see the first images of him returning from captivity. So we're seeing really the families gathered in Kibbutz Be'eri here, the family of Ohad Ben Ami, all awaiting the return, the expected return. And again, Hamas has delayed the return. They're keeping Israel guessing. Last week they went early. They released the hostages earlier than expected. This week they're releasing them later than expected. So really playing these little games with Israel.
Absolutely. And Ohad, I want to talk a little bit about his story. Yeah. His wife, Roz, has been a fierce, strong advocate trying to get him out. She has her own health struggles as well. And so it's important to note that Roz was actually kidnapped with Ohad on October 7th. Roz was later released November of 2023 in the first ceasefire deal that saw the release of women, of children, of some elderly people, some men under a certain age. But she's been fighting fiercely. His story shows the innocence of people on October 7th. This man was kidnapped in his underwear. He just woke up that morning. He had a shirt on, and we know this because there's video of his captivity, of him being actually abducted. You know, Hamas made sure to capture all of these moments, and the moments actually help us piece together what their stories might be, unfortunately. But the innocence of waking up on a Shabbat morning, Simchat Torah, to see these barbaric human beings barge into their homes, set their homes on fire, kill so many innocent human beings. One of the last messages Ohad sent to his daughter, he was keeping in touch with on October 7th, he said, quote, Shema Israel, they're here, meaning they're here in my home. And it was then where Ohad was taken with his wife, Roz. Like we said, Roz was released, but she's been fighting like no other to get him home. He will be reuniting with his daughters, his family, his wife today. I can't imagine that. That's a reunification that...
A very joyful reunification that
wow.
we're eagerly awaiting
yes.
today. And really, I mean, you're right. We we have to remember how this all began on October 7th, the absolute brutality that Hamas exhibited that day, and so many tragic stories, so many people murdered, over 1,200 people murdered, and many hundreds taken in to Gaza in captivity, many in their underwear, as you said. I mean, this all happened very, very early in the morning. It was Shabbat. It was a holiday. People were gathered with their families, and so really, really tragic. And we have to remember that this is how it started on October 7th. And 491 days later, these three hostages are set to come home, and we're seeing again the visuals of Deir el-Balach. We see here a city intact. And as we heard from Colonel Amit Asa, who was saying that Deir el-Balach is one of the Hamas strongholds, one of the last remaining Hamas strongholds. The IDF has not operated heavily in that area because we know that they are holding a great number of hostages there. They're using them as human shields. And so this is why we're seeing, you know, in stark contrast to a lot of other areas in Gaza where we see buildings destroyed, here we see buildings nearly intact. I mean, very little IDF operation in this city. And again, we're seeing all of the crowds of Palestinians gathered in a very orderly fashion, we should say, stark contrast to what we saw with the release of Gadi Moses and Ohad Ben Ami when we were reporting on that just 2 weeks ago. And again, we're awaiting the Red Cross. We keep hearing reports that they're about to arrive, but they're still making their way over now. So they are about to arrive, though, it seems. We're all awaiting the arrival of the Red Cross, taking their time to arrive.
Yeah, so just for our viewers to understand really how this all goes down is the Red Cross vehicles make their way to this location that Hamas selects, and then Hamas brings the hostages in their own vehicles to this point. They then have this very propaganda-like ceremony that, unfortunately, like Red
Cross plays along with.
Red Cross doesn't have to do that, right? There's no documentation that needs to be signed. I mean, look, there was no documentation when they were taken captive either. So there's
it's
really,
all for show.
This isn't a necessary step, but this is purposeful, right?
Yeah.
This delay is purposeful. So what happens is these hostages are transferred to this location, then they're picked up by the Red Cross. Once this so-and-so, documentation is signed off, it's important to know what happens next is once they're in the hands of the Red Cross, they're then transferred to Israel. I will say, speaking to so many people in this crowd that I've interviewed, they don't trust when the Red Cross has these hostages. They say, sometimes the Red Cross will initially report that hostages seem to be in stable condition. A lot of people here say we don't believe it until they're in the hands of the IDF. That's the moment that they know that this is real. They are coming home. This long wait, 491 days is over for these hostages. There's a lot of mistrust in this country.
Again, until they're not in the hands of the IDF. And by the way, rightfully so, the Red Cross has done nothing for 491 days. They have not visited a single hostage. They have not properly transferred medicine to the hostages. They have not even inquired as to their status. We didn't know who was alive and who was dead, unfortunately, until the first stage of this hostage deal, until we finally received the list from Hamas. So the Red Cross really doing nothing besides playing along with Hamas and transferring these, just basically driving these hostages from point A to point B. And so, of course, there's a lot of mistrust on the part of Israelis for the Red Cross, absolutely.
Definitely, and we're even hearing about some of these wounds that these hostages are coming out with. We know that one of the female soldiers, Daniela Gilboa, she had a gunshot wound to the leg that was never taken care of in Hamas captivity. Can you imagine a girl in her 20s, early 20s, walking out of Hamas captivity on her own 2 feet with a bullet in her leg still? That has not been taken care of. Her aunt later said a week after she was released that bullet would likely be removed in another procedure now that she is back in Israel. But a lot of these hostages are coming out for a reason in this 33-person first phase of this deal. They're coming out because Hamas calls them humanitarian hostages, but of course they all are. but it's because they
Oh,
likely
so
have...
we're seeing right now the Red Cross arriving, trying to make their way through a crowd of civilians, of Hamas members that have gathered there. So we are finally seeing the 3 Red Cross vehicles arriving on the scene. They're slowly making their way towards the sort of the stage that Hamas has erected there. And again, we're seeing the first Red Cross vehicle making its way in through the crowd. Lots of cameras that we're seeing set up. A lot of people in the crowds there coming to see the hostages being transferred. And the Red Cross has now arrived.
They've
At
arrived
the pickup scene.
Yeah.
But we still don't see the vehicles, the Hamas vehicles with the hostages. So the Red Cross has arrived, but we're waiting to see Hamas deliver the hostages. We're waiting to see them release them. And from what we know from previous releases, and of course the stage that they've set up, that they will parade the hostages on stage. They'll give them a gift bag, and of course a certificate of being a hostage. I'm not quite sure, is all very, very ridiculous. Again, so the Red Cross has arrived, which means that any moment now, the 3 hostages are supposed to be released by Hamas. So we're waiting for the first visuals of the hostages. Again, very orderly, very organized scenes that we're seeing here today, in contrast to some of the previous scenes that we've seen. Hamas is fully in control. There's cameras everywhere. This is a very, very much staged event. The Red Cross has arrived. Again, in delay. We're really, we were expecting the hostages at 8:30. It's now after 10, and we are still waiting for them, and we are waiting for the 3 hostages to arrive, waiting to see what condition they're in.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is that we know that there's 2 locations of this release happening today. Right now, we don't know if the first release will include 2 hostages or 1 hostage. And so we are seeing emotional tears on your screen right now. This is a family member of Ohad Ben Ami. We know that his story is one where it could be a happy ending at the end of this, seeing his family reuniting together. His family has been waiting for him. His wife, Raz, has been fighting for him. She has her own health problems after being held in Hamas captivity for more than 50 days. She was released in November 2023.
This is Raz's mother, actually. So she's, we're seeing on the screen right now, Ohad Ben Ami's mother-in-law, eagerly anticipating his return.
These are the moments all of them have been waiting for. This eager moment, they are waiting. You said Hamas is playing games. Well, they're playing games with the people you're seeing on your screen in tears, waiting to see their loved one after 491 days coming out. It is hard to see this because you know these families have struggled. They've struggled with their own nightmares, their own traumas on October 7th, replaying everything that happens. We've heard these horrific stories of these hostages that have come out of captivity, their testimonies. We've heard testimonies that Ofer Calderon and Yarden Vivas were held in cages in their first initial days of Hamas captivity. It is stories, these are stories that you think they're made up, right? Because they're so hard to hear. But then you realize they're real. These people experience this, and they're living proof. They're living proof of survival. And that's the strength of these people. We've already seen the strength of hostages that have come out, like Emily Damari, the bravery, the courage.
And Lily Albag, all the IDF observers. I mean,
Unbelievable.
Incredible bravery. Gadi Moses, who was attacked by the crowds, and he just stood there smiling. And you know, Shosh, I just want to say for our viewers, all morning it's been cloudy and cold, and right now, just as we're awaiting the release of the hostages, the sun has come out. Everyone, maybe in a symbolic gesture, the sky opening up and smiling down upon us here, and we're seeing not only the families on the screen eagerly anticipating, but also here in Hostages Square. Behind me, you can see the crowd all some people in tears. I mean, really, there's sort of silence in the crowd. Everyone is waiting to see the first images of the hostages. Again, we don't know what their condition will be when they come out. In Israel, all the preparations have been made, are being made. Ichilov and Sheba hospitals in Tel Aviv ready to receive the hostages as they arrive. Soroka and Barzilai in Beersheba and Ashkelon on standby in case their condition does not allow them to make their way to Tel Aviv. And we saw, of course, the helicopters waiting. And here we're seeing the families clapping. We're waiting to see. We still don't see the first images of the hostages, but they are about to be released any moment now.
Yeah, so the first step is these hostages will be taken to Re'im military base in southern Israel. They will receive initial checkups there. They will be reunited with their families. I want to talk about Eli Sharabi for one moment. His 76-year-old mother is said to be waiting for him there. At first, when the war started, the family of Eli Sharabi tried to keep the news from her that he was taken and that her other son was also taken from Kibbutz Be'eri. They tried to shield her from knowing the truth, that her two granddaughters were also murdered, that her daughter-in-law was murdered on October 7th. And eventually the family had to say the truth, that they were in captivity, Yossi and Eli Sharabi. Today, she will be reuniting with one of her sons, Eli Sharabi, at Re'im. She's been waiting. She's been fighting along with Sharon Sharabi, one of the other sons of the Sharabi family, who has both of his brothers in Hamas captivity.
Yossi and Eli lived next door in Kibbutz Be'eri. They were very, very close, a very tight-knit family, absolutely destroyed by Hamas on October 7th. But today, really some wonderful news that she will be reunited with her son.
Yeah, these are the moments we wait for. These are the feelings, the videos. We usually get the videos of these reunifications a few hours after it happens. And I know when I look at my phone, we get these notifications from the IDF. This is one of the videos, and it moves you to tears because you know the pain that led to that moment, and you know the pain that comes after that moment. But to have just that moment in time where you're present and you see each other, it brings all of us to tears. It really does, because these are emotional times. You know their stories. You know the impact it's had on this country for so long, right? For every day these hostages have been in captivity is every day this country has mourned and has wanted them to return, and that's important to note. So as you said, we're continuing to wait for them to cross for actually to enter where this ceremony might happen. Hamas will be bringing them in their vehicles to the ceremony site, but the delay is real.
Yes, today, in the last week, we saw Hamas really, hurriedly trying to release the hostages. They released them ahead of schedule. They rushed them out, transferred them to the Red Cross. For some reason today, they're doing just the opposite. They're taking their time. The Red Cross also taking its time to arrive at the transfer point, and the Red Cross has been there for several minutes now. The hostages still have not arrived, still have not come out. So sort of Hamas once again playing games with the Israeli public. 1 week releasing them early, the next week releasing them in delay. So these are all games, psychological games that Hamas is playing with the Israeli public.
Yeah, and one of those reasons might be because, officials are saying they're concerned about the fragility of this deal, like the fragile state it could be in. President Trump of the U.S. made some comments this week that upset Hamas about the U.S. potentially taking over Gaza in the future, owning Gaza, moving Palestinians to other countries like Egypt and Jordan. Hamas actually came out with a statement and said, quote, "That's a crime against humanity." So officials were concerned that there could have been some delay in this release. Maybe it's in response to what was said this week and the support that Israel had towards what President Trump did say. We also worry about the fate of phase 2 in this ceasefire deal, right? We know that hostage negotiators of Israel went back to Doha, Qatar this week to continue negotiating, having indirect talks with Hamas about getting phase 2. Now, who would phase 2 include? It would include the rest of the captives, which are men. IDF soldiers that were taken, that were serving along the border. One of those is Idan Alexander, who's an American Israeli. He is still captive there. He's young. There was a propaganda video of him released maybe last month, late December, of him alive. And those are the types of people that are still in captivity, but we also still need to complete the first phase, which includes 33 people right now at this moment in time.
And we're seeing the Red Cross vehicles being redirected. We're seeing them moving, but the hostages are not inside the vehicles. We didn't see them being transferred over, but for some reason they're starting to move. I think Hamas is perhaps redirecting them out of the way. There's a little bit of confusion as to what exactly is going on right now in Deir el-Balach. The Red Cross vehicles have arrived. Now they're being told to move aside. They started driving, and we are still awaiting the release of the hostages. We're still awaiting the first visuals of the hostages. We don't know their conditions. After 491 days, we are waiting. And again, Hamas doesn't want to blow up the deal. It's in their interest to keep this deal going, but they are playing games as much as possible.
Definitely.
With the Israeli public, with Israel, using psychological warfare in any way that they can. Again, yesterday, releasing the list of hostages, the 3 men, the names of the hostages they were supposed to release today, releasing it in delay. They were supposed to release it at 4 p.m. They released it several hours later. There was a lot of apprehension here in Israel that perhaps they might back out or play games. But again, we're seeing them sort of playing these little games, little psychological games with Israel. But again, we see them. So it seems they've moved the Red Cross vehicles out of the way, sort of positioning them. And we are now awaiting the Hamas vehicle to arrive with the 3 hostages. It's supposed to happen really any moment now to see the first visuals of the hostages. And you can see on the screen now as well the anticipation of the crowd here at Hostage Square.
Yeah, and it's always in full anticipation. To be honest, it's not that Hamas wants this, but the longer they wait, the more people will come out to Hostage Square to support. And that's the thing here is, of course it's Shabbat, but people are still coming out here. We see a family right now coming here with a big Israeli flag with 2 children, right? Like these parents teach their kids about this, and they teach their kids that you show up for people that are coming out of captivity.
To show support, absolutely.
This is how this country works. We're continuing to see delay. Like we said, it could be politically motivated. This could be on purpose. What's interesting, and you mentioned this before, is the structure of this handover location. It is so intact compared to the other release sites that we've seen. Last week, we saw one of the hostages released on the ruins of Sinwar's home in Khan Yunis.
Yeah.
These sites are purposeful, right? There's a meaning behind all of it.
Strategic location.
Right,
absolutely.
And so today, we mentioned that Hamas is a stronghold in this central Gaza city. Okay, so this is what they're probably showing. It's important to note these locations have meaning. Everything that Hamas does has significance. And if you watch this live stream with that lens on, you'll have a different perspective. We hear some people cheering right now in Hostage Square. It seems like hopefully very soon.
People singing in Hostages Square,
Yeah.
waiting the first visuals, awaiting the release, waving flags, and people have started just sort of erupting in song.
Yeah.
So very heartwarming to see as they wait. And absolutely, this location was chosen very strategically by Hamas today, following U.S. President Donald Trump's comments about relocating Gazans, about the fact that Hamas will no longer rule Gaza, the day after Hamas choosing this location because it's one of its final strongholds. It's a city that is largely intact. The IDF did not operate there because we know that hostages are being held in the city, being used as human shields. And so the IDF has, of course, been careful not to operate there. So Hamas showing President Trump and the world that they are very much still in control of Gaza, that not all of Gaza has been destroyed, in the war, and so a very strategic, very strategic choice. And also you see the pickup trucks. I mean, lines and lines of cars, lines of terrorists in full military gear with their guns. So it's all really a show to U.S. President Donald Trump, to the world, that Hamas is still very much in control of Gaza and that it's not going anywhere.
I think it's important to know in a time like this is they want to show that they have a stronghold of the Gaza Strip. But let's remember that their own people in Gaza, these Palestinians, have also had no food, no electricity. They've been living in these campsite locations, a lot of them in makeshift tents. The weather here in Israel has been atrocious. We've had winds coming off the coast like no other. We actually had a tsunami warning at one point during this week because the weather was so terrible. There was an earthquake off the coast of Greece. Why am I telling you this? Because I'm telling you this that Hamas doesn't care about their own people. If they did, they wouldn't be trying to have a show. Remember, Hamas started this war on October 7th. That is the fact of this. And there's only hostages because Hamas refuses to give them up. Palestinians have only suffered because of Hamas. If Hamas wanted to put their weapons down, return the hostages, Palestinians wouldn't suffer. And I bring this up because we see this stronghold happening now. We hear people right now cheering in Hostage Square. Just more waiting game of what's to come. I know that it will erupt hopefully very soon with more cheers and tears and emotion once these three men are released. Like we said, it's unclear at this time if two men will come out in the first ceremony, one man hostage will come out in the first ceremony. We know that there will be two different location sites for this, and we just learn as we go when it comes to this.
Absolutely. There's really no rules, no rule book, no playbook here. Hamas, again, playing games, sometimes bringing the hostages out early, ahead of schedule, sometimes, like today, delaying their release. They were supposed to be released at 8:30. They have now delayed it. It's after 10 o'clock, and we're still waiting for the first images of the hostages. The Red Cross has arrived at the pickup scene. We're seeing 3 Red Cross vehicles. And for some reason, there is, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for the hostages, the first images of the hostages to come out. Hamas playing games. Again, they're setting up. We saw them all morning setting up a stage, positioning cameramen all around.
I think truly since 7 a.m. this
7
morning.
7 a.m., yeah.
And we're still here. It's about 3.5, almost 4 hours later, right?
Yeah.
We're still waiting for this to happen. We've said there's delays for possible political reasons, unclear. But just remember this. These hostages are also delayed too. They're in limbo. They probably don't know what's going on. Remember, they're not getting all the facts that we are. They're just being thrown into these situations. They have no free will in Gaza. They were taken, they were held against their own will. And now they're also in a state of limbo. What's going on? They were probably told you might be released, you are being released, and now you wonder what their mental state is. Okay, am I being released or am I not?
And many of them have been held in isolation for months. Mm-hmm. Many of them have not seen sunlight, have not seen daylight in months. And so we really don't know the condition that they're coming out in. It's going to be, for many, it's a shock to suddenly come out, suddenly see sunlight for the first time in months, suddenly see people for the first time in months. And so it's quite a shocking situation for them. We don't know their medical condition. We don't know their psychological condition. Hamas, we do know, likes to allow them to shower, clothes them, feeds them in the days before so that it appears as though they've been held in good condition. But of course, we know that's not the case.
Right. And we've seen some of these hostages walking out. Some of them look a little bit more frail than others. Some of them look strong. But I will say, one of the families noted this week, they said, actually, this was the brother of Ofer Calderon. He said, what you see from the outside is not what you see on the inside. He said this at a press conference this week. He said, don't let the photos fool you. There is a different story on the inside. The rehabilitation process is lengthy, and it will continue to go on. And every day is hard. Every day has its ups, its downs. And that's important to keep in mind today. When you watch these hostages coming out of Gaza, know that they might look strong, but there is a 16-month story you do not know of what they
Okay,
endured.
we're seeing something happening at the scene. We're seeing the cameras being panned over. So there might be one of the hostages arriving. We're waiting to see. We see a car approaching.
It looks as if they're here. They're coming.
We don't know if it's going to be each hostage released individually for them to drag this out,
Sure.
or if they're going to release 2 or 3 at once. We're waiting to see. Hamas doesn't exactly announce its plans ahead of time.
It
We're
seems as if
waiting.
these cars are actually starting to enter at this point.
Yeah.
You see these Hamas terrorists putting this whole show on, standing in the street. Like we said, this is a very different location than what we've seen in the past. There's a lot more people, and it seemed as if there's a lot more Hamas armed terrorists in a particular order.
All wearing masks, of course, to avoid identification by Israel. We see them fully masked. And in contrast to sort of the civilian clothes that they've been wearing the past 16 months, fighting and hiding amongst the civilian population in Gaza, using them as human shields.
Correct.
As well. And so we see a vehicle, but it's unclear if the hostages are inside or not. We're waiting to see. We see a lot of people pulling out their camera phones in anticipation.
Yeah, and this is a moment here in Hostage Square. People are on the edge of their seats, literally on their toes, trying to guess who this might be coming out of the car. I mean, we're learning all of this information as this video comes out. I mean, the only people that know what's actually happening is Hamas at this point. Israel doesn't even know who's the first hostages to be released. But I know there really is silence here in Hostage Square. This is what happens. People are waiting. They'll erupt in cheers once they see this person coming out of the car, but they're all just trying to get a glimpse of imagining someone for 491 days tucked away in the worst form of humanity possible on this planet Earth, leaving a vehicle.
And we're seeing not just in Hostages Square, but also scenes of family members, friends, and members of Kibbutz Be'eri, all gathered together in the kibbutz, waiting for Eli Sharabi to return. He was a member of the kibbutz.
Same with Ohad. We have 2 hostages that are leaving that are from Kibbutz Be'eri today,
Yeah.
and that's why this release means so much to them. We know that Levy, we've reported, is a Nova survivor. He survived Nova, and he was then taken into Hamas captivity. And so,
From Rishon LeZion, from central Israel.
Correct.
And he just happened to be at the Nova Festival.
yeah, and let me just give you some form of an inch of who this man is. He was known, as his brother has said in the past, as a child, he used to break things just to fix them because he's really good at fixing and problem solving. He worked at a startup here in the Tel Aviv area, I believe in tech, and he was a traveler. He loved to travel with his wife. He was at Nova with his wife for an experience just moments before they arrived. Actually, moments after they arrived, the rockets started going off from Gaza into southern Israel. They made contact with their mother, who was watching their 2-year-old son at the time, and staying in communication until they eventually ended up in one of the mamaz, one of the bomb shelters, which we know, unfortunately, has an infamous name.
We're seeing the car now making its way. We're seeing one car making its way into the center of the square. Again, it's unclear who's inside the car. It's unclear if the hostages are inside, if there's one hostage, if there are any hostages inside this car.
Got it.
So we're waiting to see. It's reversing now, so a lot of maneuvering. And of course, all of this, we have to say, being staged by Al Jazeera, which has exclusivity for this event, for all the hostage transfers. And we know that Al Jazeera also helps to set it up, to set up the stage, to set up the cameras. Oh, and here we're seeing now another pickup truck entering with many Hamas terrorists standing in the back of the pickup truck, fully armed, fully masked, in full military gear. So we're seeing some movement at the transfer site, but it's still unclear who.
Wow. Take a look at this pickup
now more
truck.
cars arriving.
Take
now
a look
van.
at this pickup truck.
A van is arriving. It's likely that the pickup truck was accompanying the van. The pickup truck with Hamas terrorists in the back. We're seeing more cars entering now. A van flanked by 2 pickup trucks. So it's likely that the hostages are inside this van, but we still don't know. Waiting for the first images of these hostages. We're seeing.
And a third
We're
van
seeing a
is
door
here.
opening.
Third
But
van
we're
has
waiting.
arrived. Another
We're
van
waiting.
has arrived. And look at these pickup trucks. You see Hamas terrorists on the back side of the bed of the pickup truck with their weapons pointed upwards. They're in their full masked. They're fully hiding their identities. You know, this is not a civilized society, and that's critical to note. These people want to rule the Gaza Strip. You can see it's ruled by terrorists. And these innocent hostages are stuck. They've been stuck in a system that they were not supposed to be in, taken from their homes, taken from bomb shelters. These 3 men have been through hell and back. We're just waiting to see who comes out of this van. It's a waiting game.
It's a waiting game, and Hamas once again taking their time, drawing this out, building up the drama, building up the tension. It's all for show. We have to remember that everything we're seeing now is all for show. Hamas men making their way towards the stage. We're seeing one of the Hamas terrorists going up on the stage. They are preparing for the signing ceremony, most likely. And again, you know, I want to point out earlier in the broadcast, Colonel Amit Asa also pointed out that the sign that we're seeing today on stage is a new sign. Mm-hmm. It's a new sign, and it's sending a very clear message to U.S. President Donald Trump. They wrote in Arabic, in Hebrew, and in English, "We're the flood." The flood, of course, referring to Al-Aqsa flood, what they call the October 7th massacre, and the war's next day. So they're essentially sending a message to U.S. President Donald Trump that we are here the day after. We will rule Gaza the day after, and whatever plans you may have for Gaza, you can forget about them because we are here to stay. And now we're seeing one of the Hamas terrorists making some sort of declaration on stage.
It's
reading off of
unbelievable
something.
that this is what we see. It feels as if it's a movie. You watch this,
and that's the point. It's
right.
staged just to come across as though it's some kind of movie, PR show. That's the point.
I mean, to go through this, you know, as us, we're analyzing every moment of this.
Week after week.
Right, and we see the same antics. Actually, we see the antics getting worse and worse, if you ask me, and from our reporting, from seeing it firsthand through this live stream. But you see, like you said, he's reading something to the crowd. Remember, the crowd is handpicked people to likely be there. People that support them, people that they're bringing to this area for a reason. There's no need for a declaration to be read. This isn't, remember.
It's for show. It's part of their show.
Right.
We have to remember that. Today, they really are putting on a show. I mean, really, if you compare, as you said, to the last couple times that we've seen, today they are really putting on a show. They're taking their time. They've set up so many cameras. Really show of force, massive amounts of Hamas armed terrorists. And we're seeing now the Red Cross. We're seeing the Red Cross
Many
representatives
vehicles.
exiting
Yeah.
their cars and making their way to the stage, most likely for the signing ceremony. So they're going to go up on stage, do this little signing ceremony, part of the show, and then, only then, likely will the hostages exit the van. And usually they are paraded on stage as well.
Right.
We don't know, again, how they're going to exit, if they're going to be able to walk on their own 2 feet. We see now the Red Cross taking part in this farce. I mean, really ridiculous that they are playing along with this, going onto stage, signing these fake transfer orders or documents that Hamas has put, and they're waiting now. Yeah, and this is, we haven't seen this in previous transfers. I mean, they've really upped their game in terms of the scene, the staging, the show that they're putting on.
Here we go. It looks like a Hamas.
And we're seeing it once again, Hamas
going up to the stage.
Going up to the stage. Look at you can see, look at how it's video taped. You have the cameraman recording all the moves. I mean, again, he's giving another declaration to the crowd. Really, really taking their time today. Really, really putting on a show. And like you said, when we compare this to the previous weeks, this is something that we haven't seen before.
It feels different. And I want to say it also feels different in Hostage Square, because right now, as all this is unfolding, we're hearing uplifting music here in Hostage Square. So the chaos, the terroristic feel that we're seeing on the live stream, here in Hostage Square is uplifting music. So the two combined, it's a bit of a strange reality. But here in Israel, they don't want people here to get clouded by what you see, right? We know this is a show. We've said it's a show. Everything our viewers are watching on the screen right now is purposeful. It's tactical. There's no need for it at all.
No need for it whatsoever.
No. And these documents that the Red Cross right now is handing back and forth with these terrorists, likely some type of senior commander he's working with at this moment. He's signing a document as we speak. And what comes next?
So it's all for show. We have to remember that as we're seeing this is completely just a show and the Red Cross playing along. So what we can expect now is, once they finish signing these documents, what we can expect is to see the hostages exiting the van that's flanked by 2 cars, one in front, one behind, of Hamas terrorists. And we can expect to see the first images of the hostages after 491 days exiting the vehicles. We don't know yet if they're going to be able to walk on their own 2 feet. We'll see momentarily. And again, we're seeing pictures on the side, on the screen, of the family of Ohad Ben Ami, eagerly waiting to see him for the first time after 491 days.
It's important to also note the Red Cross is interacting with people completely disclosing, not showing their identity, right? The Red Cross doesn't even know who they're working with. Of course, these are terrorists, right? But when you're handing over a life, you don't even get the full facts. And the problem is that the Red Cross is just complying. And when you see an international organization...
Oh, here we go. Here we go, of course. Let's see. The Red Cross have finished signing the documents. So we should be seeing... We're seeing the doors opening from the van. And let's see. Let's see. We're waiting to see who is going to be exiting the van.
There's more cheering here in Hostage Square. Everybody, here we
go. We see someone exiting the van, and cheers are erupting here in Hostages Square.
Unclear who it is at this moment.
It's
the
unclear.
Person is still being shielded in some capacity.
Cheers absolutely erupting here in Hostages Square.
We're trying to get a glimpse of who this could possibly be.
We're seeing one of the hostages making his way to the stage. It's still unclear who this is.
Whoever it is.
He's flanked by Hamas terrorists.
He's on his own 2 feet right now, walking. Wow, wow, wow.
It looks like it's Ohad.
This is Ohad.
Ohad Ben Ami. Ohad Ben Ami. You know, he's walking on his own 2 feet, but we see that he's being supported quite heavily by the 2 Hamas terrorists.
Wow, to see these families in this live stream right now.
He's wearing sunglasses, probably to shield his eyes from the sunlight because he's been held underground.
Just look at the emotion in these families. They have had zero sign of life from this man in 16 months. This is a moment they will never forget. He's on his own 2 feet. He does look a lot thinner than his images and how he was taken.
He looks very frail, and he looks as though he's being propped up by the 2 Hamas terrorists by his side. He is walking on his own 2 feet, but just barely. And he's got sunglasses on to shield his eyes, most likely from the sun. We know that many of these hostages have been held underground. And we're seeing also Levy now on stage as well, and Eli Sharabi.
Wow, we have 3 of them.
All three have been released. So we have seen now the first images of Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami. Ohad Ben Ami being propped up by the terrorists. He looks very frail, but they're all walking on their own 2 feet, standing on stage right now.
Unbelievable sight that we're witnessing. Eli Sharabi looks very thin compared to his images that were released by his family during all of this chaos.
And we see Eli Sharabi looking very thin, looking, you know, all 3 of them seem very thin compared to when they went into Gaza. They seem that they are unable to stand on their own. They look very frail, so not the sort of better medical conditions that we've seen the previous hostages coming out of. Remember, these are men that have lost, Eli Sharabi and Levy, they've lost their loved ones. But Ohad Ben Ami, I mean, you can really see that they're shielding him now.
Seems as if maybe they're speaking to him.
Yes, they're speaking to him, but they're propping him up. So we do know, unfortunately, that these 3 hostages are being returned not in great medical condition, and of course not in a good psychological state of mind, as Levy, Eli Sharabi especially, their families were tragically murdered on October 7th. So we are seeing a little bit of different visuals than we've been used to seeing the past 3 weeks. These sort of defiant Israeli hostages coming out. Here we see 3 men who are very frail, who we don't see sort of these, you know, we don't see the waving, and
it seems as if there's a terrorist that keeps going over to Ohad.
No, they're interviewing Ohad right now. That's what we're being told. They are interviewing Ohad right now, but it's unclear what he's saying. It's unclear what they're asking. We can't hear that here, but they are interviewing him on Al Jazeera, and so we don't know what's going on, but they're, again, really putting on a show. We have not seen this before. We have not seen the hostages being interviewed. We've seen simply the transfer, and here they are letting these men speak. It's the first time we've seen them.
It's the first time we've seen men. Like last weekend, we didn't see Yarden Bibas and Ofer speak to a Hamas camera, right? And they used the women as a tool to do that, right? We saw the female observers, the first to be released. We saw Emily Damari and them actually speaking to the camera. They made a whole video. But when it comes to the men, remember, it's for a reason. So this is definitely different from what we've seen in the past. And it's important to note that you have these families watching this. It's upsetting to see, but it's exciting to see. A lot of these hostages have described this moment as a rebirth for them, a renewal, a brand new take on life as they're given a second chance at life. So you see these 3 men on stage. It's hard to watch because you know that they look a lot thinner than what they were.
So I think that's also another interesting contrast. We're seeing really this show that Hamas has put on it's a much bigger show than they've done in previous weeks. And we know from the previous hostages that have already come back that Hamas did not let them speak on stage. They were much more defiant, much more adamant. Here, it seems that they've rehearsed, they've coached them what to say, perhaps. These men not in a good state, not psychologically, not physically. We're seeing their family members in tears over the scenes that we're seeing. Again, psychological warfare on the part of Hamas. We're seeing Eli Sharabi really looking...
he looks very thin.
Very, very frail. Very, very
remember,
frail.
this is the last form of torture they're going through. This is the last step. Hamas said, not only will you be in captivity for this long, but we're going to make sure you remember your last moments in Gaza.
Absolutely.
The humiliation these men experience, but the strength that I know that they have and that their families know that they have, standing there, knowing they'll be going home to Israel. I don't even think they probably realize.
They're just going through their procedures right now, waiting to be transferred into the hands of the Red Cross. You know, this is all for show. They have no choice but to go along with it. The Red Cross not even intervening here to release these hostages from Hamas. You know, they're standing aside, letting these three men who've just been in captivity for 491 days, who can barely stand on their own 2 feet, they're allowing them to be interviewed on stage. Really just ridiculous scenes that we're seeing here, and these three men have no choice but to go along with it.
This is Levy right now speaking to this terrorist who put a microphone in his face. Levy will be returning to his 3-year-old son who's been waiting for him, asking where his Abba, his father, has been, his Ima, his mom, who was brutally murdered on October 7th. This man has been through hell. He was taken from the Nova Music Festival. He was taken in the back of a pickup truck. We know that. So remember, the way they're being treated now tells a different story. They were taken in the most gruesome, barbaric ways possible. It's hard to believe that human beings have the ability to inflict so much pain on others. It looks as if this terrorist has concluded his interviews. He has raised his hand up in the air, almost showing a sign of victory. That's what it appears to look like.
That's what Hamas is trying to portray here today. They are trying to portray a sense of victory. They're trying to portray strength. They've put on a very, very elaborate show for us today. And here in Hostages Square, they're announcing that we see the three hostages, and we see that they're trying really to embarrass them, to... Here, well, we see now that they're coming off stage. We see Ohad being really held, propped up by these two Hamas terrorists, and all three are now making their way over to the Red Cross vehicles. Now, once they get in to the Red Cross vehicles, they will be driven over to the Re'im base. They'll first be transferred over to the IDF, and only then can we officially say that they are in Israeli hands.
That's correct.
They are going to be driven over to transfer point for the IDF. They'll be taken to the Re'im military base, where they'll undergo a preliminary medical investigation.
We have Levy now getting into the Red Cross vehicle. Ohad was just put in.
Yeah, so we're seeing the three men entering the Red Cross vehicles. They're about to make their way over to the transfer to the IDF. They're going to the Re'im military base. They'll undergo sort of a preliminary medical examination, after which they'll also be reunited with their families, and then, depending on their medical condition, will be taken either to hospitals here in Tel Aviv or flown into hospitals in Beersheba and Ashkelon further south.
Yeah, you know what's also interesting is I'm thinking about the other hostages that were taken captive that have been released, right? I don't know if they ever watched these, but to think like they were in the same shoes just a few weeks ago, for them to finally be able to paint an image of what's actually happening, the unbelievable scenes that we're seeing in Gaza right now. We have these 2 Red Cross workers
taking instructions from Hamas
and surrounded by them. Look, as the Red Cross, they're probably very fearful going into this territory, but there is no control.
No, the Red Cross operate in Gaza. They have done absolutely nothing. You know, they do have leverage on Hamas, and they have not used it at all. They have not made any public statements calling on Hamas to, you know, let them visit the hostages. They've not made any public statements asking Hamas to at least let them know the status or the conditions of the hostages. They've really been absolutely silent this entire time, taking all of their instructions from Hamas, playing along with all of Hamas's games. They've used none of the leverage that they have to try and help any of the Israeli hostages. They've done absolutely nothing. Their silence has been deafening. And the only time we do see the Red Cross in action is when they are picking up these hostages and delivering them to the IDF. Really, really despicable behavior, despicable actions from the International Red Cross that has proved to be absolutely useless during these past 16 months.
So all 3 men are in the Red Cross vehicles. I want to say that the Hostage and Missing Families Forum, they just released a statement. They said, quote, "The disturbing images from the release of Ohad, Eli, and Or serve as yet another stark and painful evidence that leaves no room for doubt. There is no time to waste for the hostages. We know that phase 2 of this deal is currently being negotiated. We said it's in more of a fragile state. Part of phase 2 would be the rest of the hostages, men under the age of 50 years old, IDF male soldiers. These men will be in captivity longer than these 33 people that are set to come out in phase 1. The conditions only get worse, and the hostages that have been released advocate every single day to make sure these hostages are out, because every day spent is an extra day in hell. And that's what's critical to remember, is that every hour, that's more. Every second, every minute is just another form of torture these people are going through.
Absolutely. And I want to recap for our viewers. Right now we're seeing images of the massive crowd that's gathered here at Hostages Square. And now we're seeing, once again, the images of the 3 hostages being paraded on stage. I just want to point out, you know, that this time around, Hamas has really put on a very, very elaborate show. In previous weeks, we've seen the hostages able to come up on stage and put up their hands with peace signs and victory signs. And today, if we can show that Hamas is essentially holding all 3 men, not allowing them to put up their hands in victory. Instead, the Hamas terrorists, we can see them raising their hands. They did not like these images of the hostages showing defiance that we've seen the past 3 months. It makes them look bad. And so today we see them very, very carefully controlling the hostages, very carefully humiliating the hostages, trying to put them through this last bit of humiliation before they transfer them over to the Red Cross. And so right now the hostages are in the car, in the Red Cross vehicles, making their way to the transfer point with the IDF. But really just showing the evil that is Hamas, trying to do sort of show that they are victorious, and one last humiliation for these 3 hostages, some of who have lost their entire families. And so this is really what we're seeing. Now we're hearing, I just want to update our viewers, we're hearing cheers in Hostages Square, and that is because the IDF has just put out a statement that the Red Cross has transferred the 3 hostages into IDF hands. So the 3 hostages are now in IDF hands, in Israeli hands. They are back in Israeli hands after 491 days. Cheers erupting in Hostages Square. Really a joyous moment, a joyous occasion. And now they're going to make their way to Re'im.
And at Re'im, they'll be able to change their clothes. That scene that we saw, you know, when the video comes back up on the screen, or Levy was dressed in military uniform.
Right.
He was taken as a civilian from Nova. He's 34 years old. He's not actively serving, likely in the military in the IDF. And you see on the screen right now, Ohad is also dressed.
They're all dressed in sort of this
military
sort
style,
of
but you see how
military
Or
style.
is dressed really in military, and then you have Eli and Ohad. Honestly, it looks as if it's a prisoner's uniform.
They're trying to draw this comparison between the hostages, trying to paint them as IDF soldiers or as prisoners of war, comparing them to the Palestinian terrorists that are being released. And of course, there is no moral equivalence between civilians, terrorists, and terrorists, civilians that were dragged out of their bed in their underwear, people who were at a music festival looking to have fun and taken captive into Gaza, and terrorists with blood on their hands, murderers who are being released. There's absolutely no equivalence, but of course Hamas trying to draw this sort of parallel between the two.
Yeah, and you look at Eli Sharabi, he's the hostage in the middle there. You look at him and you wonder, do you know if your family has been killed? He's coming back to Israel without the embrace of his 2 daughters, his wife. Does he know? And when will he find out? And will it be at Reim, a military base? These are the moments that you wonder. And it's hard to be a reporter and to analyze these things because it really doesn't feel like it's our place to get into the middle of a family's ordeal. But when we know more than the hostages, it's our job to report the facts. The facts are that Eli's wife was murdered and his 2 children were too. And he will be reunited with his mother at Reim, who's been waiting for him. His brother Yossi, his body is still in Gaza. He was taken as a captive and was declared dead by the IDF. These stories are physically painful to even say out loud, and these families have a hard reality ahead of them, but the strength of Israel is behind them, and you can feel that with the support that's here today. And I think that they are also aware that this country has hugged them in their hardest times, in moments of positivity, and there is a whole country waiting for them to come home. So they left hell, and they're about to enter a haven, a place that wants them back home, a place that is ready to embrace them, people that are ready to enjoy their company and to feel their presence again.
Absolutely. And so we're seeing the contrasting scenes, the crowds at Tel Aviv Hostages Square, and of course the Hamas show in Deir el-Balach, a strategic location that they've chosen for today's release, one of their last strongholds in Gaza. And really this sort of last humiliation that they're trying to put these 3 male hostages through. And Shosh, as you said, it's a very bittersweet moment. You really have to be thinking what's going through their minds right now. Do they know that their family members have been murdered? Do they know, what's going on? It's really heartbreaking to think what is going through their minds. But there has to be also a sense of relief, a sense of joy that they're finally back home, that they're finally, after 491 days, being returned to Israel. And of course, we have to remember that there are still many hostages left in Gaza right now. In Hostages Square, they're listing and naming each and every one of the hostages still in captivity in Gaza. And I just want to sort of talk about the next phases. So over the next 2 weeks, we are expected to see the release of 6 more hostages, 3 hostages next Saturday, and another 3 hostages the following Saturday. And in the last week, the 3 weeks from now, we're expected to see the remaining release of 11 hostages, the 11 remaining hostages, some of whom are still alive, others who we know are dead, coming back in coffins. And so it's going to be harder from week to week to see these releases. and Hamas clearly prepared for this very strategic show. I just want to say that right now what we're seeing are people here in Israel along the road leading to the Re'im base. They've set up lots of different locations, people on the roadside with flags, with yellow flags for the hostages, Israeli flags, signs showing their support for the hostages as they make their way back home.
Another thing I want to keep in mind for a lot of our viewers in the diaspora is we're expecting American Israeli Sagi Dekel-Chen to be released in this phase of the deal. Sagi has a wife, has children. His wife gave birth while he's been in captivity. This is a man that should be coming home in this phase. We're expecting him to over the next 2 weeks when we see the release of more and more hostages coming out. But there are hostages with multiple nationalities. Actually, I believe it's Ohad has German citizenship as well. These are people that come from different countries. They have different backgrounds. This is a crisis that has and should have shaken the world, right? These are people that hold citizenship from all across the globe. But Sagi is one of those hostages that is American to come out. He's said to be alive, as well as Idan Alexander, who is an IDF soldier who was taken along the border on October 7th.
I think it's a good opportunity, as you mentioned, to remind our viewers that on October 7th, Hamas raped, murdered, and kidnapped not only Israelis, but people from countless different countries from around the world. And, you know, it's absolutely shaken Israelis to their core and should have shaken the world as well. But unfortunately, we saw very little pressure from these countries to release their own nationals. But we have to remember that Hamas did not differentiate on October 7th. Not between Israelis, not between Jews, not between Arabs, and not between foreign nationals.
And not only that, it's official. We have 16 Israelis that have come out today. That is the number of hostages returned, in addition to 5 Thai nationals
in this first phase of the
that
deal,
were
right?
just released last Saturday. These 5 Thai nationals were working on farms. They were working on kibbutzim. They're not Israeli, but they're here for a better life, to make more money, to send their money back home to their loved ones in Thailand. And they were released last week. It goes to your point that they didn't just take anyone, they took everyone captive. It didn't matter. Anyone who was in the land of Israel was a problem to them. And they inflicted a lot of pain on so many people that ended up surviving these atrocities and now have to rehabilitate because of them. But these 5 Thai nationals were officially reunited with their families this week. These people really have been through hell. We know that a few of them were held together in pure darkness. They said that they would pray for the sun to come. They would pray just to see the lights of a car in the little bit inch of creaks in the floors that they could, or in the walls that they could, any form of light. They had a 24-hour captor near them at all times. And there was one Thai hostage, who said he prayed and he dreamed of this Thai salad he used to eat. And you think these little things that all of us might take for granted every day are things that these people wish for. And these moments that these 3 men that you're seeing on your screen right now probably had these exact moments, right? That kept them sane, that kept them to the point where they survived. You know,
Absolutely.
They survived 491 days. And that shows strength. And even though they might not be mentally as strong, they really are. They survived. They did it. They're on this stage, and they did it. And now they're coming home.
Absolutely. I mean, every hostage release that we've seen in this first phase of the hostage deal, we see the resilience of the Israeli hostages. We see the resilience of all the hostages, the Thai hostages as well. I mean, this really is a testament to the strength, the resilience of Israelis, the support that their families and all of Israel has shown for these hostages. You know, they've reported receiving messages of support from their families in Gaza as well, and really a testament of their mental strength that they've been able to withstand 491 days in Hamas captivity in the most brutal conditions, and make their way back home to Israel. And we know that right now We are waiting for official confirmation that they are back in Israeli territory, so they're making their way right now back to Israel, but we're waiting for the official confirmation that they are in Israel.
Yeah. I mean, look, these men might look different. They might look more frail. They might look thinner. Their heads might be shaved. But they figured out a way to get through this. They figured out a way to survive. And I hope that they survive to tell the stories that they went through, so this world doesn't forget the barbaric humans that live in Gaza, that rule Gaza, that hold their own people hostage and have no free will. The Palestinian struggle is because of Hamas, and that's critical to remember. This struggle is real. Israelis feel the struggle. We have Israelis coming out right now that experience that. We're receiving reports that the IDF is speaking to the hostages. They're in the hands of hostages right now, the hands of the IDF right now. This is a moment. Can you imagine? They probably dreamed of this.
And we're waiting. We see the people waiting to welcome them back home into Israel. So we're just waiting for the official confirmation. We're receiving word from the IDF that the hostages are in okay condition. I'm not going to say good condition. I'm not going to say great condition, but they're in okay condition. And they will be making their way to the Re'im base, where they will finally be reunited with their families. And we should have the visuals of these reunification, these videos that Israelis wait. Every week we wait for these videos. I mean, they really bring tears to my eyes. I know to your eyes as well. And it's just really heartwarming to see them reunited with their families. And so we're waiting for these visuals today as well. And right now, we're just waiting for official confirmation that they've made their way back into Israel. But the IDF has spoken to the hostages, and so we're waiting for the official confirmation right now. And again, at Hostages Square, we see people, I guess, a little bit less tension in the air as they know that they're out of Hamas's hands.
Yeah, they're out of Hamas's hands. They're not quite in the hands of the IDF yet. They're en route. I want to say that a lot of these hostages that have been released, it's the first time they were speaking Hebrew when they see these IDF soldiers, right? We are hearing most of them are fluent in Arabic now.
They've learned Arabic. They've picked up Arabic.
Yeah, and the four female soldiers that were released together actually said to one of the pilots in the helicopter that they took to the hospital when they were released is, weren't you going to say that in Arabic to us? Or they made a comment about speaking in Arabic because these girls, these hostages, this is all they've heard for the last 16 months. And this is a moment to hear Hebrew again for the first time. You can't imagine what that might do to the soul, what that might do to the heart, right? And like I said, they might look different, but the strength is absolutely there. The resilience is there. The defiance is there. They survived, and they're home. And we hope that they'll tell their stories one day so people don't forget.
Absolutely. And we're, of course, waiting for the confirmation that they're here in Israel. They're making their way back. 3 men, Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami, each with their own personal stories, some tragic. Some are going to be reunited with their wife and kids after 491 days. And again, we have next week 3 more hostages set to be released. Again, we don't know who they will be. Hamas releases the names only 24 hours ahead of time.
Yep.
But we're still expecting 6 more hostages in the next 2 weeks, and then another 11 hostages after that for phase 1 to be complete. And we do know that negotiations are underway now for phase 2 of the deal. There are still hostages remaining in Gaza. And again, what we saw today, I just want to reiterate for our viewers, was really one of the most elaborate, if not the most elaborate show that we've seen Hamas put on during this first stage of the deal. They really came prepared today. They had, speeches. They had signing ceremonies. They actually brought in someone to interview the hostages, something they've never done before. So really putting on this elaborate show in a very strategic location, Deir el-Balach, one of the last remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza. So we're seeing a very different scenario play out this week than we've seen in previous weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And something the Israeli government continues to demand after Hamas has violated the ceasefire multiple times is they're demanding for the release of Kafir, Ariel, and Shiri Bibas. They have still not come out of Hamas captivity. They were supposed to be released in one of the first days of this first phase of this deal. Children, women, female soldiers, now men. Where are Shiri, Ariel, Kafir? I do want to read a statement that Yarden put out. It's his first public statement he made. He said, quote, on October 7th, I was kidnapped from Israel. On February 1st, 2025, I returned to a different country. I knew that the people of Israel unite in times of disaster, but I never knew to what extent. He continued to say that he thanks his family for fighting, the country for fighting alongside the IDF soldiers. He called them heroes. He said, quote, sadly, my family hasn't returned to me yet. They are still there. My light is still there. And as long as they're there, everything here is dark. He says, thanks to you, I was brought back. Help me bring the light back to my life. There is a demand for these children to come home, for Shiri to come home. Hamas has violated the ceasefire agreement by not releasing them. In addition, they violated it by delaying the times in which we were supposed to receive these names. They've also violated it by not releasing Arbel Yehud at the right time. She was also surrounded by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In addition to Gadi Moses, they were both held by PIJ. It's important to remember the history and the facts of this phase of this deal. As we report, we're going to continue to provide context because it's critical. As we continue to see these reunifications, we need to remember the start. We need to remember the facts that led us to that point. And the fact is that Yarden Bibas is without his immediate family.
You know, Yarden Bibas, Shiri Bibas, the Bibas children, Kfir and Ariel, have become a symbol of the hostages, the two youngest boys, the two youngest children in Hamas captivity. The red-headed, beautiful baby boys, they're the symbol, but there are so many other tragic stories like that of the Bibas family today. We're seeing Eli Sharabi, who suffered, whose family, we still don't know the fate of the Bibas family. We still don't know the fate of Shiri, Kfir, and Ariel, and of course, the family has asked not to speculate, so we, of course, won't do that. But we are seeing, for example, the return today of Eli Sharabi, who we do know the fate of his family. Tragically, they were all murdered on October 7th. And so, in a very similar situation to Yarden Bibas, there's many more stories like that. And I just want to point out for our viewers right now, we're seeing the helicopters, the IDF waiting to transfer the 3 hostages to the hospitals, to be reunited with their families. We're still awaiting final confirmation that they've been transferred to the IDF, that they've made it onto Israeli soil, so we're still waiting for that confirmation. And in the meantime, we're seeing these scenes unfolding both in Gaza. Again, the elaborate show that Hamas put on for us today, for the world today, and also we are awaiting the transfer of the hostages back into IDF hands, back into Israeli territory. So we're seeing cars making their way. It's unclear if those are the hostages, the Red Cross cars, or what. But we're waiting for that final confirmation.
Yes, and another hostage that's set to be released in this deal, in this phase, is Shlomo Mansour. He's the oldest captive right now, 86 years old, Holocaust survivor, still in Hamas captivity. He is supposed to be released in this first phase because of his age. He has not been released yet. In addition to Omer Shem Tov, who was taken from Nova, he has celiac disease, he has asthma. It's unclear why he has not been released.
With very difficult medical conditions.
Very difficult. And we know someone else has another chronic illness. We are waiting for them. Of course, it's very possible they could be released in the next few weeks. We do know more hostages will be coming out. That is critical to say. and no one will speculate on their conditions until they come out. We've seen Hamas say that people have died in captivity.
Daniela Gilboa.
Gilboa. We saw Hannah Kutz, I believe.
Yeah, they said they were killed at Daniela Gilboa back in November, and then she's already back home in Israel.
And actually, one of the first statements she put out on her Instagram was thanking people for not believing the rumors.
Yeah.
She walked out on her own 2 feet after Hamas said that she was killed in an airstrike, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to remember these things, that you cannot trust a terrorist organization. You cannot trust what they say. And that's why you cannot speculate on the conditions of these hostages, and it's critical as journalists, as people in Israel, as people around the world. There needs to continue to be hope, because you truly never know who will walk out.
Absolutely, and I think Israelis, and especially the Israelis here today at Hostages Square, are full of hope. We see it, we feel it, talking to people here, talking to the families. They are all full of hope, as are we all, and we are really just waiting to hear that the hostages have made it back into Israeli territory. We are awaiting their reunions, and of course a very joyous day that 3 more hostages are back, have been transferred over and are back. And we're seeing again people also waiting on the side of the road, waiting to welcome them back. So really an incredible show of support by Israelis throughout the country.
Throughout. I mean, you see these people out here on Shabbat in Hostage Square, but on the street right now, as you can see, these yellow flags, Israeli flags. Last week we saw a Thai flag in the crowd for the Thai nationals that were released. It doesn't matter who you are, people in Israel will support you. And that goes to show. I mean, what you see is what you get in Israel, right? It's the reality. I always say that the morals of Israel is the biggest blessing and it's the biggest curse all at the same time, because the greatest enemies know how to penetrate that, right? Today, we have Palestinian prisoners being released in exchange for these innocent lives, these innocent hostages. Because Israel values life, the price they pay is having to release people that are serving life sentences in Israeli prison. People that have committed serious crimes that have been convicted. They went through a judicial process to get to this point. People that have been involved in bombings and shootings and stabbings.
A lot of terrorists with blood on their hands. And we know that this is the cost of the deal, but Israel is willing to pay that price because it values life, it values the lives of its hostages, and it wants to see them all returned home. So we are now just waiting to hear. The hostages right now are making their way into Israel. We are waiting for that final confirmation that they've crossed into Israeli territory. We're hearing now in Hostages Square tears of sadness, tears of joy. They're playing very moving music in the background, and really just waiting for that final confirmation. And you know what? We've just received word that the hostages are now in IDF hands. They are officially, now we can say for sure, they are officially back in IDF hands. They are with the IDF. They are back in Israeli territory. And I think with that, we're going to wrap up our live broadcast. But before we go, Shosh, I just want to hear, and now they are announcing it on the speaker, on the megaphone, that the 3 hostages are now in IDF hands, officially back in Israeli hands after 491 days in captivity. So, Shosh, I just want to hear really your final thoughts on today.
It was a delayed day. It was never supposed to be this late. We were expecting the hostages to come out around 8:30. Actually, it was supposed to be 2 ceremonies, 2 handovers. It ended up being 1 of all 3, and maybe that is the best case scenario, that all 3 came back together. They are alive. They stood on their own 2 feet. They walked out, and they're now in the hands of the IDF. And this is probably a day that they dreamed of, and it's a day that's coming to fruition, and it's happening, and they're about to be reunited with their families. It's exciting.
Absolutely. It's very exciting, very emotional, very joyous day today as we see the release of all Levy, Eli Sharabi, and Ohad Ben Ami after 491 days in Hamas captivity. I just want to recap for our viewers, what we saw today was a very, very elaborate show put on by Hamas, something that we haven't seen before in previous releases in the past few weeks. And of course, we're waiting now. They're in IDF hands. They're going to be transferred to the Re'im military base to undergo sort of a preliminary medical examination. And after that, they're going to be transferred over by helicopter to the hospitals, either in Tel Aviv or Ichilov or Sheba or Soroka or Barzilai, and there they will be reunited with their families. And so really a wonderful, another joyous day, another 3 hostages back home. And of course, you can continue to follow ILTV for all of the latest updates, for the videos, the emotional videos of the reunions. And of course, we'll be here next week again as Hamas is expected to release 3 more hostages next week. Thank you to Colonel Amit Asa for joining us. Thank you to Shosh Bedrosian, and thank you to all our viewers for tuning in.